All right, so we're going to get started. So this particular webinar today, we actually didn't put an announcement out about it. So if you're here, that's really good news. It looks like a lot of people are still showing up. But just a couple housekeeping matters before this gets started. Where I'm at, there's been rolling power failures. We already had one this morning. If this does have a power failure, they usually last no more than a minute or two. And then I'll be back on the webinar after that. And then also just wanted to say that this is a very important webinar. This may actually be, in my opinion, looking at what makes people fail and succeed in their job search is really probably one of the most important webinars you can ever be on. So I think this is definitely worth sticking around for this one. Most people always stick around in these webinars, but worth the fact that you showed up. This is a very important webinar because there's really nothing that prevents anyone from getting a position other than this. And in terms of the number of firms and jobs that you applied to when you're looking for a position. And just another quick point that I think is very important is that I'm also going to cover the 20 reasons that's related to this that you may not be getting jobs with law firms. So you may be applying to all these law firms and not getting positions. And it's really important to understand why. And there's going to be 20 reasons that we go over. And it's not necessarily things like your qualifications aren't good enough or other issues with your background. It's typically more related to things like the markets you're applying to, the number of firms you're applying to, the number of firms without jobs you're applying to, the recency of the jobs you're applying to, all those sorts of things. So I'm going to cover those for you today. And so each of those 20 things that I cover is one tip to improve your job search. And I also want to say, just before we get started, that I don't operate this company anymore because it just was very difficult to even cover its costs. But I used to operate a company called Legal Authority. And what that company would do is it would submit resumes and cover letters for people of all the firms in a market that may have done what they did. So if the person wanted to be a trademark attorney in Los Angeles, it would research all the firms that did trademark law, and there might be 500 of them, and it would help them apply to those firms. And the majority of people that use the service actually got interviews and jobs because they were applying to so many places. And this particular thing that I'm going to talk to you about today is really one of the most important job search tools anyone can use. And I also noticed it was very interesting with this service is that I started seeing partners in major law firms like AmLaw, 100 law firms even using the service because it was enabling them to market themselves to all the places where they could potentially work and that would hire them. And it's hard if you're, like, for example, an attorney without business. So they were doing it. And then I even saw certain law schools around the country that had LLM programs and things. And everyone in certain LLM programs, like there was one in education, everyone was applying to education law firms. There was another one in healthcare or something. Everyone was doing that and getting jobs. So the answer to this is it's never enough, but I'm going to go into a lot more detail about why that's the case and kind of 20 reasons that people typically are rejected from law firms and why you need to keep applying to more and why certain markets may not be the best markets for you to be applying to. And your practice area also has a lot to do with it. And then just as a kind of a final note that at the end of this webinar, we always do Q&A. So any questions you have about this issue that we're talking about today, or any questions that you have about anything related to your career, that I'm happy to answer. And the kind of questions people ask are always related to job search. They're related to getting let go by firms. They're related to psychological issues, maybe conflicts at work, all those sorts of things. Any questions that you do have as you're listening to this webinar, just realize that a lot of those are going to be probably pretty relevant to what we're talking about today with all of this. So let's get started. Your success in your job search is going to depend on quite a few factors that are going to make it more or less likely that you'll succeed. Different people obviously fail within their job search and they give up. And a lot of these factors are things that relate to whether or not they're going to succeed. And a lot of these factors when we're working with candidates, trying to place them, these factors are really not either within their control or even our control. And because you can't always control these variables when you're searching, it's often not your fault if things don't happen immediately for your job search. So what happens, I talk to people all the time and they say, oh, I've applied to on my own. I've applied to 100 places and I haven't gotten an interview. Therefore, I'm going to give up. And there's a lot of processes that go into whether or not they succeed. And, I'm going to talk about those today. And so giving up may be the answer, but usually it definitely isn't. And most lawyers, just so you understand, when people are doing a search on their own or with us at BCG, very few attorneys are applying to less than 50 in per market, meaning if you're looking in Los Angeles, you may be applying to 100. If you're looking in a smaller market like Las Vegas, you may be applying to 50. This is what other people are doing. So I just want to, attorneys are very secretive about how many firms they're applying to, but I'm just talking about applying to law firms. These are the numbers that most people are doing. Some people that are very status conscious and don't think they should be getting rejected and things may just apply to less than 20. This is what they do. They think that's all they should have to do to apply. But I just want to make sure that if you're listening to this, you understand that if you're applying to giant law firms, they're often receiving hundreds of applicants for one position. If you are the top applicant or the most of one of those firms, sure, you can apply to less than 20. But even if you went to Harvard Law School, there's 500 or 600 people that graduate from that there per year. And a lot of them are applying to the same firms as lateral attorneys or as new attorneys. And just do the math. That's one top 10 law school and there's others. So you have to realize that most of your peers are applying to lots of firms. And these are just what the numbers say. And this is what I'm seeing. And these are what I'm seeing before people even come to work with us. I'm just showing you what happens. And then a lot of times what happens is attorneys in the most common practice areas, which are things like corporate and commercial litigation, apply to the most law firms because they are in a market, like good sized market, Miami or Chicago. There's hundreds of firms that are good firms that do commercial litigation. And then sometimes the corporate market is very slow. So if you're a corporate attorney, there may be no interviews occurring when the market gets slow. So you may need to apply to, every firm practically that does corporate that represents the size client you do to get an interview. This is just how it works. And I'm just trying to tell you what other people are doing and what you need to do. And then often the attorneys in the largest legal markets, meaning your big cities, which are like New York and those sorts of places, need to apply to the most firms. And those in the smallest markets often we're applying to fewer firms. And they should be applying to more. And I'll show you how all of this is done today. But this is how it works. If you're an attorney in a big legal market, you have often hundreds of options of places you can apply to in your practice area. And you should. And the most successful searches always involve, almost always, applying to more rather than few firms. How can you possibly know at what point your resume is going to reach someone that actually needs someone like you? Just think about if you're sitting picking up your mail every day and you're getting offers about solar power and all these different things come into your mailbox, or someone that does aluminum siding, or another person that cleans chimneys. They're going to have to reach you at the exact point in time that you need something like that. And if you do, and they're the only person that's offering to put solar panels on your house that day, then probably you're going to have a good chance. But 100 to over, if that's sent to you 100 times or 500 times, even though you are someone that could use solar panels and afford solar panels, they may not reach you at the right time. So this is how it is with jobs and with applying to firms. You can't possibly know where the a person is on the buying process of hiring an attorney when you're applying. Just because they don't interview you, the solar panel company doesn't stop sending things to people that are qualified. Why would they? They know that it's going to work. Lawyers are offering a service. You're selling yourself to potential clients, which are law firms willing to buy your service. And you too should apply the same basic marketing strategies that anyone who advertises on the radio, anyone who advertises on television, anyone who advertises in a newspaper, anybody who advertises in a magazine, anybody who advertises online. Obviously, people online in different publications can try to focus their ads, but they know that they need to do a lot of application, a lot of advertising many times to get a job. So again, why wouldn't you? You'd have to be, it just doesn't make any sense that people think this way. No, there's reasons people think this way because their ego's involved and all these other things. But for the most part, you need to realize that if you don't apply to more places, then you're just shorting yourself short and you can do much better. The more firms and opportunities you apply to, the greater the odds of success. And what do I mean by firms? Applying to firms without even having openings. And that may do your practice area and it may be suited to the type of firm you want to work in. And then I also mean applying to jobs, the more odds of success you have. And one of the things people think is I think, oh, I'm just telling you some excuses. This firm can't possibly pay me what I want to make. Or, oh, this firm, I read something bad about them on an online review site, or somebody said something bad about them. Come on, if somebody said something bad about the firm, maybe that's only confined to working in a practice area. Maybe that's only confined to working with one person. Maybe that's confined to, who knows? But you can't, maybe that's the person that is writing the bad things. Maybe they did something wrong. Or maybe the people that did something that are writing bad things were let go for poor performance. Who knows? You can't judge a firm just by a few people saying something negative and also in thinking that the job may not pay as much. All these things are negotiable when you get an offer, but understanding why you're not getting interviews and job offers and why it often has nothing to do with you is important. And most attorneys wrongly believe that there's something wrong with applying to so many firms. So this is just an example of what BCG candidates do and that are successful. 92% of them, of the 10, meaning 9.2, are applying to over 20 firms. And per market, meaning if they have 10 markets, think about it. They're applying to, when we send them jobs, 85% of active jobs matching their experience and the prestige level the firms are applying to every 30 days. 76% are approving 4 out of 5 jobs or opportunities we send them, which is the majority. And then this is just jobs and opportunities, the 3 out of 5. I hope that makes sense. So these are the factors that are going to impact how many firms you should apply to and whether or not you get interviews. And I'll go through them. There's 20 of them, but the first one is your practice area. Whatever practice area that you're in is going to have a lot of impact about whether or not you're going to succeed in your job search. And a lot of people don't realize this. They just think, hey, if I apply to this firm and they're interested in me, then that's a problem. But your practice area often has everything to do with your success in sending applications out. It's hugely important. It's really one of the most important things. So there's some practice areas where there's hardly any opportunities. So one example would be a trademark. When the economy slows down and new businesses aren't being started, and there's not any sort of expansion going on, and there's actually contraction, trademark can be a practice area where there's hardly any jobs, not even just in the country, but in each region. If you're in a practice area like this, it can be very discouraging for an attorney when things slow down because they don't see any jobs and their applications are falling on dead ears. They should be applying to small and large firms and trying to find places that might be able to use them, but they're not. So they just think, oh, there's no jobs, I should give up. And different practice areas will go through boom and bust cycles. Corporate is one of them. So in good economies, if you're in that practice area, in different parts of it, you might be an A attorney, you might be a securities attorney, but in good economies, there's a lot of opportunities for corporate attorneys, and so much so that people are practically hired from regardless of often the school limitations, but they're hired just very aggressively because the law firms need bodies to do the work. And so if you're in a niche practice area, corporate's not exactly a niche practice area, but if you're in certain practice areas, that can make your search easier or harder. And then if you're in a low demand practice area, this is going to make your search much more complex than if you're in a high demand practice area. So if you're in a low demand practice area, you need to apply to more places in your market, and you probably need to apply to firms outside of your market. So just if your job is working on, I don't know, automotive, I'm just giving you an example about a job that someone might have. If you're just say you're like a chemical engineer working for a big company that has one factory or one thing in a small town in Tennessee. If you lose your job working as a chemical engineer in the small town in Tennessee, you're obviously going to need to look at other markets, right, to find a job. So it's the same thing if you're in a low demand practice area. You can't just look where you're at. If there's low demand practice area in your market, you need to look at other markets. And people don't realize this, but it's definitely true. Practice areas are affected by just way too many issues to mention. But if you're in a practice area where there's not a lot of demand, which you can find very easily by going to BCG or whatever site and doing searches for jobs in that practice area, it's going to determine how marketable your practice area is. So if your practice area is not in demand, nothing that you're doing and not getting interviews is not your fault. It shouldn't impact your ego or anything. You should be applying, realizing that there's just not a lot of opportunities for people like you, and therefore you need to find opportunities. No different than some business going door to door trying to sell something or whatever. You just need to be able to apply and find jobs, just like the solar power companies sending letters and things to your house or apartment or your parents' house, whatever, looking for people to buy its service. They're going to have to kiss a lot of frogs before they find a prince. And it's the same thing with you. Another thing that impacts the success of your search is going to be the amount of experience you have to do. The amount of experience you have, that has an awful lot to do also with your marketability. When you're starting a career and you have less than 1 year of experience, you're not going to have a good chance of getting hired laterally by law firms because you don't yet know what you're doing and you haven't yet had any employment stability. Again, if you're in law school and you're applying to firms, then, or just your success, the only thing that to measure you on is the law school you went to and how well you did. Employers, when that happens, will just sort you into boxes based on your law school and how well you did there. That's all they have. So that's going to impact. So if you went to a local law school, like you went to, I don't know, Detroit College of Law, or I don't know, it's called different now, where I grew up, then that's a local law school. You're probably not going to be able to apply to the most prestigious law firms in New York that hire people from Ivy League law schools with high grade point averages, because that's just where you're at right now. And you can move to those firms later, but not now. Again, then when you have between 2 and 6 years of experience, most attorneys, that's one of the most marketable points in their career because they have just enough experience to be attractive as lateral hires, meaning they know what they're doing for the most part. And they're also not someone that they're going to want to, that's going to want to be partner right away. And then in addition to not wanting to be partner right away, they're going to have billing rates, meaning that the more senior you get, are going to have billing rates that are close to what partners would have, and clients would want partners and not senior associates to do the work. So that's how that works. So most of the lateral firm opportunities in the market are always for mid-level associates. And when you have more than 6 years of experience and no portable business, meaning you don't have clients and so forth, it becomes increasingly difficult to get a position in most firms. Not all. Some firms will hire people that are very senior during different types of economies, but not always. And so that's something to think about. But there's just, when you get more senior, it's important to understand that there's very few lateral opportunities for senior attorneys with more than 6 years of experience. And then there's even fewer opportunities for people with more than 10 years of experience. And then there's even fewer law firm opportunities for attorneys with more than 15 years of experience. So that's just how that works. So there's another thing. The third thing is the economic and social cycle, which I have alluded to in the past, is a reason you will or will not get interviews. Different practice areas, again, I said with things like trademark and corporate, for example, are more or less in demand depending on the economic cycle we're in. So one example is that when interest rates are low, meaning people are renting office buildings or buying office buildings and buying different commercial properties, there's obviously going to be a lot more of that in low interest environments, and real estate in areas where the economy is expanding might be more in demand. And that's usually the case. And lots of real estate attorneys get jobs, and you can apply to fewer firms, get jobs. And right now, example is healthcare is undergoing lots of policy changes, and all these lawsuits are starting for things about Medicare billing and stuff. And so that is becoming a very active practice area, even for senior people. If you look on the BCG site, it's very interesting. And data privacy has been a big practice area, when a few years ago there were all these data breaches, and there still are. So companies are hiring lots of data privacy attorneys, and there's not a lot of people with that experience. So everyone is being smart, and a lot of people are going into that practice area because of that. And then environmental is typically always more active at the national level when Democrats are in power, and then less active when Republicans are in power. That's just always worked that way. And immigration, the same thing. It can be more active when Democrats are in power, and then less active when Republicans are in power. So these things all control your practice areas. And so you can't just say, oh, I'm not getting a job as an environmental attorney, or I'm not getting a job as an immigration attorney. It's just often because, or real estate attorneys, often just because of the economic and social cycle. And sometimes these are just widespread, and other times they're not. Corporate law tends to be very active during good economic cycles, and nationally, and others it's not. For example, during the 2011 recession, Texas stayed very active in terms of corporate law because there was a lot of oil work going on there, and that was increasing the work for law firms, and they weren't as active in a recession. So these things can all impact things. And then the markets you're looking at and not looking at are going to determine your success. So at different points in time, different markets will give you different opportunities. So you have markets that are contracting and losing work, and then you have markets that are expanding. And some markets also may have very few attorneys or law firms in your practice area, and others may have too many. Markets like New York City have more than enough attorneys and law firms. There's an overabundance of them, and employers have lots of choices on who they can hire, because if you're in New York City and you have an opening for a fifth-year corporate attorney, that's very easy for the firms to find. Other markets, an example would be like Saginaw, Michigan, which is a smaller market, and they would have a limited number of attorneys and opportunities in different practice areas. So you would need to look at more firms in that city. So if in Saginaw there's 50 law firms or 30 law firms, you would probably want to apply to them all. Whereas if you're in New York, you certainly wouldn't want to apply to 10,000 law firms, but it gives you an example of the size market. And so your success in any market is going to be also dependent on the market you're looking. An example would be if you're in Memphis and you don't have incredible experience in the practice area, and you're trying to get positions in large law firms in New York City or Washington, D.C. or Miami, why would, if there's so many attorneys already in that area that have local contacts and the bar or whatever, they're going to hire there because why would they want to hire someone from Memphis? And people, by the way, this is just a cautionary tale because I'm sure, like a substantial number of people on this webinar are want to look at Washington, D.C. So many people do. I'm probably 50% of the attorneys that we represent, maybe it's 30, but a big percentage all want to look at Washington, D.C. They could be in Alabama, put down Washington, D.C. But why Washington, D.C. has the highest percentage of attorneys of anywhere in the country? And it's a significant portion of the population. So why would they need to hire someone from Alabama to work there when they can hire someone who's already living there, who's already demonstrated they're committed to the area? And why would they need to do that? And so you have to understand that the markets you're applying to may often have a lot to do with your success. I see things all the time where someone in San Antonio, Texas decides that they want to work in LA and they may not even have the bar. And they say, oh, if you don't succeed, there's something wrong with BCG. Again, why would a law firm hire someone from San Antonio if they've got plenty of people that already do that there and have the bar? So you have to just understand all these things. And you're much more likely, by the way, to get a position if you're applying to somewhere where you have connections or you've lived and worked before than if you apply to one that you're not. So if you are in Atlanta, the most logical market for you to apply to would be Atlanta if you're already working there. Or maybe you grew up and your family was from Birmingham, Alabama, and so you want to move back there. That would be a good reason for you to apply to firms there. But at the same idea, why would a firm in Chicago be interested in it? Now they might, but you would need to apply to more of, and so you just have to understand that. And sometimes certain markets may be growing well economically and growing at such a rate that they will hire people from out of state, and which just makes sense. And others may be contracting. So just to give you an example of how that works, for a long time, Palo Alto and that region of the area of the country was having all these IPOs and all this companies going there to start, and they needed lots and lots of bodies to do all this corporate work. So they were hiring people from small markets or mid-sized markets and small firms and mid-sized firms to come out there and work at the biggest firms because they didn't have people. So sometimes markets like that are out of control and growing. Other times they're not. Sometimes practice areas in those markets. So you have to understand all that. And then the next thing, which I've already alluded to, is the competition in the markets you're applying to and the number of local applicants the firms are likely to receive for their openings. So some markets just have a tremendous amount of competition for positions. And so the law firms in these markets can hire exactly what they want. So an example would be a major law firm in New York City. They want a third-year associate with bank finance experience. They almost always get that. It's so extreme that every third-year associate will immediately, that does bank finance at a firm that's comparable to the one that's trying to hire them, every third-year associate will get phone calls immediately from multiple recruiters about that job. This is how it works. It's a very aggressive market where there's lots of recruiters and all sorts of things competing to put people in jobs. And so the law firm can always get a third-year associate. But if the same law firm is in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and they have an opening for a third-year bank finance associate, they will probably get a lot of those, if any. So they will be happy with the first to 8th-year associate. It's just how it works. If they can't find anybody, they'll take what they can get. Law firms in most major cities, if you're applying to job openings, can be very discriminating in terms of what they're going after for the same, because lots of people are going to be competing for those positions. So just imagine there's tons of attorneys in New York City looking for positions at hundreds of top 100, 200 law firms. So they can, they have their choice, and there's a lot of competition. So if you're applying to major firms and you're from Cincinnati trying to move to New York, well, just there's just a lot of competition there already. And when there's more competition, it's going to be harder to get a position. So law firms can discriminate against perceived weaknesses in your background, which they might not do in a lesser competitive market. For example, if you're unemployed, and I'm not trying to rain in anyone's parade here, because I would estimate a large portion of significant percentage of people in New York lose their jobs and they don't have another one lined up. But if you're unemployed and from a major law firm in New York and trying to go to another one, that's a perceived weakness. So they can, if they're receiving 25 applicants of the quality of you that are employed, and then it's less of a risk to hire the employed person. So these law firms, and they can also discriminate against you based on the law schools. If Duke is a better law school than Michigan and two people did the exact same there, they would probably hire from Duke. Now, I don't even know what the rankings are because they bounce up and down from year to year, but that should give you a little bit of understanding how that works. And the unemployed law firms in New York, because there's so much competition that you may have to go outside that market or do something in order to get a job. So understanding the competition and why you're unemployed or why you can't get jobs in big firms based on things in your background or an imperfect record compared to other people has a lot to do with it. This is another important point that's going to impact the number of interviews and jobs you get with some firms is the number of positions that you've had and your employment stability. So if you were hiring, just say you were hiring a nanny, I give this example a lot, to take care of your kids. If you had an applicant who had for the past 5 years moved between one job and another, then every 6 months to 1 year, then you would probably, I just noticed someone raised their hand, and we'll take questions when this is over. If you have a question, then just write it down or put it in the chat, and then I will answer it when we'll finish the presentation, because I don't want some people just, anyway. Law firms have a strong preference for hiring people that are stable, less stable. So the example I was giving the nanny, if you had a nanny that had 5 jobs in the past 3 years or 6 jobs in the past 3 years and one that had 1, you would probably prefer the one that had 1 because that person would be more likely to stick around for you. And that's the same thing with employers. Employers, when they're hiring an attorney, they want someone that is likely to stick around, will take to their training, will work in positive and negative, get through things and not make them have to replace them every time. So this is just how it works. And so if you had a lot of jobs, employers don't like that. So they want people that seem committed. They're more likely to give you an interview. So that's how it works. You would feel the same way. So every time you move a job or you leave a firm, you have to understand, okay, so what if this next firm doesn't work out? Is this law firm more likely, or am I more likely than not? How is it going to look when I'm trying to leave? So if I move from firm 1 to firm 2 and then to firm 3, if it doesn't work out at firm 3, what is firm 4 going to think of me? So you have to think very closely about that. So leaving jobs too often can be, and so you need to think about that before you leave position. And again, I'm saying this, by the way, as a recruiter, placement person who gets paid by law firms when they hire candidates. So I'm telling you that just so you understand, it's not good to leave jobs too much often unless you think it's helping your career a lot. And then the amount of business that you have is another factor. So if you're senior, that impacts a number of positions that you make, the number of, give me 1 second. Yeah, the number of firms that are likely to interview you. If you have a lot of business, that is actually a good thing for some firms and not a good thing for others. And many firms will interview you if you have a lot of business. So this is one of the more important things to realize as you get more senior. If you don't like your firm and you have a lot of business, it's actually very easy to get a job. Some firms will require a lot of business, others won't. large markets will require a lot more business than law firms, smaller firms, and law firms in smaller markets will require less. But if a large law firm has a lot of work at the partner level and not enough attorneys, they may not require business and hire senior associates, counsel, or income partners to do that work. So you see a lot of big firms have, for example, firm like Sidley and Austin has huge clients, General Motors and people like that. So they can afford to hire, they would be able to hire income partners and that sort of thing to work on those clients. But they may not be as stable when things slow down. But most law firms, just so you understand, the majority of them definitely require senior attorneys to have business. If you don't have business when you get senior, the career move for a lot of people is to go in-house. But despite these limitations, I just want everyone because I'm sure that a good proportion of people on this webinar are senior attorneys. All that means is that you just need to apply to more people, more places. It doesn't mean that you can't get a job. It just means that if firms are requiring that, and more of them are much more requiring than not, you just need to find a firm that doesn't care about it. And it always works. If you apply to enough places, someone's going to have the work, or someone that's senior be able to give that work to someone. So an example would be one of the first placements I made, just an example, was of a attorney that had left a big firm in Chicago as a securities attorney and gone to Russia and started a diaper company that was doing well until Procter & Gamble moved in with Huggies and all these brands, and then put him out of business within 3 years, and instantly after he'd been doing it for 3 years. And he basically went bankrupt and moved back to Chicago with very little resources and wanted to get a job. And so I applied him to a bunch of places, and he ended up getting a job with a firm that used to be called Preston, Gates and Ellis, because the securities attorney there was leaving to go be the personal securities attorney of Bill Gates. So they had an opening for someone without business. So this is just how it works. You can always find openings like that, if you're senior, but you have to look at a lot of places. And this particular attorney had never even been to Seattle. Like, he got a job there. And I looked him up 10 years later, and he was still a partner there and doing well. So this is always things that can work. And then how long you search for a position is also very important to your success. So this is a huge one for BCG candidates. It's a huge one for people that give up. So many people, countless, I've witnessed in my career, give up, not just with searching on BCG, but searching on their own, because they just give up. They start the search and they assume that whatever practice area and location they're in should be marketable. And if they don't get a job, there's something wrong with them. And so many people in BCG will start their search and they'll apply to 10 firms and they won't get any traction, not realizing that examples are that firms typically interview from the very first applicants. They may not close the job for 2 months while they're interviewing and making offers and backup offers, but they typically will do all that from the first applicant. So when you're a new candidate in BCG, or you show up new on a job board and you're applying to old jobs, your odds of success for old jobs are very low. So people don't stick with their searches. They give up. They say, you didn't give me an interview with 10 firms or 20 firms or 30 jobs. There must be something wrong with you. Therefore, I give up on my search. To find a law firm with someone interested in your background, you may need to apply to law firms and openings for months or even longer before you are able to find a position. That's just something that, just looking at something here. Okay. Yeah, you may need to look at jobs for months or even years and openings before you get a job. It's very common, by the way, for people to open accounts and start applying to firms every month. Maybe they'll approve 1 a month if there's a job, or 5 a month, and then reapply to those after 6 months and spend a long time looking for jobs before something opens up. It's very common for recruiters to work with people for years before calling them or emailing them different jobs as they get them. So This is all very common. This is how it works. You can't expect to just get a job immediately many times. You massage the process and you do things as you get them. And once a law firm is interested, you need to interview well and just understand that. And again, your applications to law firms must come at the right time and at the right place, like when they have the work and that sort of thing. So it's like investing in the stock market. You can invest at the right time and your stocks will go up, or you may not be investing in it. But if you continually do it, you continually invest, you're probably always going to do well. Meaning if you apply $10,000 in the market once a year over 30 years, you're going to have some downtime and some uptime, but over time, it's going to balance in your favor. It's the same thing with applying to jobs. So I can't emphasize. I really respect people that are on this webinar, because you're just learning something that right now that could just change the course of your career and life. You should never give up, because this is just how it works. People, and I see all the time, is people like searching for a position, they don't get a job, or they go on 4 or 5 bad interviews and they think, oh, I'm not fit for this. My career's over. Or I've applied to, 100 places and no one's interviewed me. I remember talking to this guy that was in the top of his class at Harvard Law School and did something like, I don't know, it wasn't physics, but majored in something crazy at MIT and went there and got a Bachelor of Science. And then, I don't know, and then maybe he got and had applied to every law firm in the market he was in, and no one would interview him. So he's thinking he failed and giving up and going to, I don't know, do some business with his friend or something. People do this all the time, and it's crazy. You have to stick with your search, and you can't give up. Come on. Over time, you will succeed. So that's what people do, is if they don't have initial success, they give up. And there's so many reasons that you might not have initial success. You're not having initial success because you may be in the wrong practice area. You may be in the wrong market. You may be too senior. You may have things in your background that are going to make it harder for you, like being unemployed or who knows. But it just doesn't mean you should give up. It just means that the market's not working in your favor. There's certain types of sales jobs. There's one company I remember that I used to study, and people putting ads on Google. And this one company would spend $100 per click. And so they would sit there, and every month they would spend $10,000 per click, getting 100 clicks or whatever from Google. And eventually someone said to them, like, why are you spending all this money? And they said, because if we convert one lead, even though we only get a few leads per month from all this expensive advertising, if we convert one lead, we make $1 million. So it's the same thing with you. Think about that. If you convert one of your applications into a job that maybe pays $200,000 a year, or 300 or whatever, then you've converted that one lead into something that could be worth $2 million or $3 million over 10 years or more. So it's a pretty good odds. You're doing something that's smart, not giving up. That's what the PPC person advertising this product or what a service or they make all that money is doing too. Another thing that's very important is whether or not you appear to move upward, sideways, or down. So what does that mean? Law firms want to see upward mobility, meaning something that you're moving firms because you're trying to move to someplace better than where you are, or a better opportunity than where you are, or you're moving to someplace similar, or you're moving down. Law firms want to believe that, and they will hire when they believe that if you're moving to a certain law firm, that law firm is likely to, just see, I want to look at one thing here. That law firm is likely, and there's a lot of good questions, by the way, coming in. If you have more questions, this is going to be a great webinar for the Q&A too. But if you look like you're moving down, say you're at this giant law firm and you're applying to the small law firm, that small law firm is not going to think you're interested in them or will stick around, right? Unless you have a compelling reason. That if you're trying to move down in terms of the quality of the firm, then that doesn't look good. But if you're moving up, that looks great. So I see instances all the time where someone may have graduated from law school and taken their first job and then ended up losing that job. And then because they failed the bar, for example, but then they got a job at an even smaller firm, but then they did very well there. And then they moved to an even bigger firm, and even a bigger firm, and even a bigger firm. So that's an idea of moving up. Another idea of moving up would be you could start at a big firm and say, all I'm doing is discovery. If you're a litigator and motions, and I want to go to court and do trials, and you go to a firm where you can do trials and you can be very well known. These are things that look like you're moving up, but most law firms want people with a history of moving to better firms or places where they can get better experience. Because if they're moving to your firm and they have a compelling reason for wanting to be there, I want to get more trial experience, or I want to work on larger clients, or I want to do all this, then you're going to be much more likely to get hired. So just think about it from the firm's point of view. You're at a small law firm, or you're at a law firm doing a mix between insurance defense and commercial litigation. And you want to do all commercial litigation because you feel you would rather represent companies in issues rather than individuals that are injured, because you feel that would be, for you, more sophisticated work. So you want to leave, you want to no longer do insurance defense, you want to do commercial litigation. That's an example of potentially moving up. That firms like that. So that would be a good reason for moving. Or say you're at a commercial litigation firm, or say you're at a corporate law firm and you're doing work for companies that are private companies, and therefore they have cost limitations and things like that. And you want to work at a firm where you're doing work on behalf of public companies because you feel that's more sophisticated. That would be moving up. Or say you're at a law firm where you're doing work on behalf of public companies, and you want to go to work at a firm where you feel like you can develop business more easily, and where you feel like you're going to be able to work more closely with clients instead of having to work with these giant corporations where you're one admitting. So then you could say, I want to move to a firm where I do private companies. And then maybe you get to the firm where you do private companies and you say, I really like that, but I want to move to a firm where I can specialize in representing healthcare companies as opposed to every type of private company. That would be a move up. So you have to just understand that when you're moving, you have to have a story for a firm. You can't just throw your application out there and expect to get hired. That's what everyone does. You have to let law firms know why you're trying to move. And this is what recruiters do. Good recruiters do this. You have to let the law firms know why you're trying to move and why this movement looks like a much more significant improvement that better fits your goals than where you're currently working, and that these goals make sense. Like the goals have to make sense. And then if you do that, then the law firms are more likely to be interested in you than if the reasons for you moving do not make it look like a lot of sense. So you have to think about these stories. You have to think about what you're telling people. You have to think about how this particular firm, how it looks like something that you're likely to stay in, and why that law firm fits what you do. If you have that story, then they like it and they like you, and they're more likely to hire you. You just have to understand how that works. I also wanted to mention that this particular webinar that we're going over right now, I can tell is a very good webinar for a lot of people. Just from the Q&A and comments, I think that people on this webinar are learning a lot, maybe more than any of these webinars that we've done in the past, because this particular topic is really showing you the reason you're not getting interviews, the reason how you can get more interviews, and the things that you may be doing wrong in your search. So this, in my opinion, is probably some of the most important information that you could ever learn. And nothing against law schools and that sort of thing, but law schools will often, in their career services offices, they certainly, if there's 300 people in a class, they don't want all 300 people applying to the same 300 firms. They want to be able to have some control over that so they can help get the people that are right for certain jobs, those jobs. But this particular thing of applying to a lot of places and a lot of markets is really your absolute best chance of getting a position and the position you want. Sometimes firms also will hire people that you couldn't believe they would hire. Like I've seen law firms hire people, AmLaw 100 law firms hire solo practitioners that have never worked for a law firm, and worked in 10 different practice areas on their own and as 10th year attorneys. I've seen this. So you can get very lucky the more places you apply. And that particular firm that did that hire, I remember, wanted someone that could be a generalist for their clients and things like family law and personal injury. Very smart hire from them, but this is just how things work. The next thing that is very important for you to understand, and I gave you an exceptions just now, but is the quality of your resume for the law firm's positions. The quality of your resume has a lot to do with the success you will experience in your search. So this particular topic, we're going to announce it this week. Last week, we wanted to get more people to do it. So we will be doing this topic next week where we do resume reviews. But you should always go and look at the former resume reviews that I've done. People will often feel that they want their resume to be a certain way because it's very personal to them, but you need to really have a good resume. So you should go and you should read or watch resume webinars that I've done. You should resume review webinars. They're very important. Articles I've written, all that sort of thing. People make huge mistakes on on the resumes. Some of the most common are to turn them into political statements, which is crazy. Why would you turn that into a political statement? Or talk about things that have nothing to do with the fact that a law firm needs a corporate attorney or a patent attorney. Actually, patent attorneys don't do that. So you can't do that, but you have to be careful. And your resume needs to look like it's a priority for you to work in a law firm and that you don't have other priorities. If you start listing on your resume, like all these activities and pro bono and all these things, the law firm's just going to think they can't make money off you, or you're going to go do something else, or you don't take things seriously. They'll look at your Facebook pages. They'll look at your Instagram, the other social media. They'll look at your TikTok. Everything you do is out in the open. And if you look like you have other priorities, then they're just going to go with someone who doesn't. They want to, their businesses. So they're just going to eliminate people that don't have the right that don't look good. So you need to really, this is extremely important. You need to make sure your resume is awesome and doesn't have these sorts of things. And you need to be very careful. And again, there's an article I wrote, very popular article about leaving sex, religion, and all this stuff off of your resume. If you make your resume a social political statement, it's just going to be very hard for you to get a job. They're going to hire someone that just looks like an attorney, by the way. When you're working for clients, you will be working for big clients that are polluters. You'll be working for clients, and this isn't a law firm. You'll be working for clients that fight polluters. You'll be working for clients that are good, clients that are bad. And the job of an attorney is to take a side for the clients and just to be open for that. In a law firm, you can certainly have a political party you're interested in, but you have to be very careful with this stuff. And then if you're applying to a job in a single practice area, this is another big one. This could turn around your entire job search. If you're a lateral attorney, I want to be very clear about this. Very important piece of information. Most jobs in law firms that are advertised are for a single practice area. I mean, that law firm is seeking someone to do one thing. They're seeking someone to be a patent attorney with a hard science background. They're seeking a real estate leasing attorney. And if you start doing things like calling yourself a real estate and corporate attorney and with some litigation experience, this is literally what people do. It's crazy, but they do it. Then the law firm is only going to be interested in someone that's a real estate leasing attorney or a real estate attorney. If you talk about all these different things that you do, that's crazy. Like people, and again, I want to really emphasize this, and this is a lot to cover in this webinar, but if you talk about multiple practice areas on your resume, law firms, at least most law firms, are not impressed. They're unimpressed because that means you're not an expert in anything. And they're going to want, their clients want experts. You would want an expert. If you had a very serious injury on your knee that required surgery of your knee, you wouldn't go to a general practitioner. If it was some kind of bone injury, you wouldn't go to a neurosurgeon. You wouldn't go to someone that's a psychiatrist who also does general medicine. You would go to an orthopedic surgeon. So clients are the same way. Clients want to hire experts. They are not impressed if you do 15 different things or 2 different or 3 different things unrelated to what they have. That's just not impressed. So it's the same thing with law firms. They want to hire experts in something. You would too. Like, here's how it works, Bob. And these are the kind of people that get hired. So let's say someone went to nursing school. Let's say someone went to nursing school. And then when they graduated from nursing school, they were a nurse for 5 years. And then they applied to law school and they went to law school and they joined the Health Law Society and they joined a journal about health law. And then in their first semester of law school, they worked for a law firm doing health law. And then their second, or maybe they worked for a health agency or something doing health law. And then their second year, worked in a law firm doing healthcare work. And then they worked in their first law firm doing healthcare work. Come on. No law firm in their right mind is going to want to hire that person if they have an opening for a healthcare lawyer. Of course. Who would you hire? The person that has a history of doing nothing but that and committed to it, or someone who just decided to do something else? Sometimes I saw a resume not too long ago. I remember someone wrote down that they went to some school and college and they did the entertainment law stuff. And then they worked in an entertainment company after college. And then they went to law school and they worked on the entertainment law journal and worked for an entertainment company their first summer. Then their second summer, all of a sudden, here they are doing general commercial litigation for some law firm. And then they graduate and all of a sudden they're doing, corporate work. Do you think that person, any law firm in their right mind, is going to realize that person's not going to leave the first time they get an opportunity to do entertainment law? This is what law firms think. Why would you leave anything on your resume that gives law firms the scent that you want to do anything but do that kind of work? But this is what people do, and they don't get jobs and they wonder what's going on. So your resume is going to be much stronger if you never say anything about your law school grades, for example. If you write down you got a 3.1 grade point average. I saw a resume from a University of North Carolina graduate, which is a good law school, the other day. And the person said that they had a 3.1, and that put them in the top 50% of their class. Why would you highlight mediocrity? Your job is to be an attorney and put forth the best arguments. But people do this all the time. They get very excited that they were in the top 50% of their class. Maybe that was their goal. No, you don't write that down. You don't put anything on your resume, any poor arguments. You wouldn't do that for a client. You don't do it. Why would you put down, I've seen people put down average LSAT scores. Someone put down a 160 I saw the other day. Okay, that's a good score, but no, you don't. Why would you? Anyway, this is what people do. So you need to make your resume as strong as possible. You can't eliminate information on there that is going to get you in trouble. You eliminate things on there that are taking sides on political or social issues. You don't. Anyway, you have to be very careful. For example, right now, there's all this backlash, for example, think about the previous backlash. One example would be the Claudine Gay, the president of Harvard. People were accusing her of plagiarism. Other people were saying it didn't matter. People were accusing her of supporting the elimination of Jews. Other people. So would you put down that you didn't support her on your resume? You worked for the campaign to support Claudine Gay, or would you put down that you didn't support her, or the campaign to remove her? All these things are just going to put you on one side of the political issue. No, you don't do that. You have to be very careful. You have to make your resume look like people that you're not on the side of a political issue. Take this crap off. Why would you have that? If 50% of the country is on the side of one political issue and the other 50% isn't, if you put that you're on the side of this political issue, all you're going to do is potentially get yourself excluded by the other 50. So I just don't understand why you would do that. It may be important to you that you're doing that, but it's not something you need to disclose. Just as you wouldn't disclose to a candidate that is polluting that you belong to Greenpeace. Why would you? That wouldn't get you with that client. And you may be at a firm where you have to do this. You don't do that. So the number of firms and jobs you're applying to, I've brought this up several times. Every time you apply to a new place, You're giving yourself more opportunities to get a job. You are basically sending yourself out there. What the process essentially is, and what you're doing when you apply to all these law firms, is you're basically just getting an offer. Can you make? I believe I'm here. Can you make money off me? If you can, your resume shows that you have the type of background that someone that is focused and isn't gonna wants to make money. Your description of what you do shows that firm's a good fit, and people may be interested in bringing you in. How do they do that? There's all sorts of ways you can do that. You should study marketing. Every attorney that's applying to jobs should have a good understanding of marketing. But you're much more effective when you're marketing things than if you are offering something to people that makes sense for them. So going to a firm and saying, as someone in the firm, I've been following your career. I was especially impressed with this matter you worked on. The reason this is impressive to me is because this and this. That's a much better offer than someone just submitting the resume. So all these things make a difference, but the more law firms you apply to, the more potential opportunities you give them, the more they're likely to benefit from you when they receive the applications. I wanted to talk about real briefly, I have this service called, and I'm not promoting it by any stretch of the imagination, but I have this service called, what's it called? BCG, I don't know, it's BCG Concierge or I don't know, but it's a service for people that want to get very in-depth personal service from me personally and whatever. And what I'm teaching you right now is something that someone paid $4,500 to me to spend a couple hours with giving this advice. And I'm going to give it to you for free right now. So this person was in some part of the country. I'm not even going to say which one, but they had taken and gotten themselves a data privacy certification. Then they had worked for their parents' company doing some in-house counsel work, a little data privacy work, and they really wanted to be a data privacy attorney, and they could not leave this market that they were in. So think Boise, Idaho or something, not a huge market. That's not the one they were in. And so I said to them, I was like, how are you going to get a job if there's no openings? And so this person said, I want to just send my application to all these firms. And I said, no, you can't do that. You have to go and you have to make a pitch. And the pitch would be data privacy is very big thing. This is a service even though you may not have this practice area, this is something you should be offering to your clients. This is how this business has increased across the country. If you hire me, you can give me your clients that need this and make a lot of money. And sure enough, this person, I don't know if they took that advice or not. I told them I helped them write cover letters doing that, gave them a list of firms to apply to. I don't know if they did that. That's the kind of stuff you need to do. If you're a practice area that's not that busy in your market, you have to make a pitch and show people why they can make money from you. And the more people you do that to, the better. Another one is the practice setting you're coming from. So this is a presentation now for people that are in-house, that are in the government, that are in academia, that may be considering leaving a law firm to go in another practice setting and then coming back. So the practice setting you're coming from is hugely important. So most law firms prefer to hire people from law firms and preferably peer firms. That's how they work. Law firms hire from other law firms. Very rarely do they hire people that aren't from other law firms. If you work for the government or a corporation or a public interest organization, for example, or academia, you're going to be used to different demands than a law firm. If, for example, working in a law firm, doing work for potential clients, you have to know how to overwork files or do extra work on files that the client may require, or less work, or how to get people to do work for people that are paying, how to be on, and then if you're working in another practice setting, you may not have those demands, and it also demonstrates lack of commitment to the law firm setting. So if you're a law firm and you have a choice between hiring a career academic and teaching in law school and someone who's a career law firm attorney, who would you hire? I've hired academics before and they aren't interested in committing because they theoretical and it's just no. So that's how it works. If you're not from a law firm, getting a position is almost always going to be more challenging because people hire people from the same practice setting. It's easier. The person knows what they're doing. If you're from a big law firm, then certain law firm, everyone in the legal community is going to know the standards of that law firm because they're going to see their work and be on the other side of deals. And if you're coming from a company, they're not going to know what the demands are. Could be anything. They have no idea. Same thing from a government office. If you were a law firm, you would hire from law firms too. So the more the practice setting you're coming from is going to have a great deal to do with how you do as well. So hugely important. Law firms typically will only hire from other practice settings when they don't have enough applications. Maybe they want to, who knows, an experience they couldn't find otherwise. This is very important to understand your practice setting. And if you're in a different practice than a law firm, you're going to obviously need to apply to a lot more firms before you get success because you're just competing against everyone else that's applying, that's not coming from a different practice setting. This is a huge one. This is also a reason that a lot of people will give up, for example, on BCG, or they'll give up on their job search. Hugely important for you to understand. One of the most important pieces of advice that I can give you if you're looking at jobs, how quickly you apply to job openings when they first come out. You should sign up for job alerts on BCG. You should sign up for them on Law Crossing. You should sign up for them on whatever other sites you use, which are LinkedIn or Indeed, whatever. But you should be able to know when jobs come out, and how quickly you apply to them is going to have a tremendous amount to do how you succeed. So let me just explain a couple things for you. So what happens with most law firms is they will have an opening, and when they have that opening, they will get a lot of applicants. So they will get usually several in the first few days, and then they will start interviewing and hiring from those people. Sometimes they'll just hire from the people they received on the first day. Why is that? Because it's a lot of work reviewing resumes. They have to sit there and open Word attachments and all this stuff, or PDFs. And then once they print that, it's just a lot of work. So they will often just open the first 10 or 20 they receive. They'll select a couple in the interview, and then they'll say, hey, if we don't like these people, then we'll look at some more resumes and interview them. But let's just get these interviews scheduled. It's a lot of work. We have to schedule all these people. It's going to take attorneys time to do it. So let's look at the first resumes we get, and we'll see if we want to hire from them. So that's how they work. So when a law firm has a job opening, they're going to lose money also. So not only do they not want to spend all this time reviewing resumes and scheduling initial interviews, but the other thing too is once they start interviewing people, then they start bringing them back for callbacks and all this stuff. And that's a sunk cost. Like they've invested 10 hours of attorney's time, which could be $5,000 or $10,000, whatever, in all this. And so they're going to want to select from that pool, not someone who applies 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks later, because that's who they hired from. So many times when you start your job search, like if you're a candidate at BCG, we may have openings that have been open for 10 weeks, but in reality, the law firm has been hiring the people that would have applied in the first week or 3 days or whatever. And so we may send you to 20 job openings. Those job openings could be weeks old because the law firm hasn't filled everything yet. They may have made offers, and then that didn't work and made another offer. And that's how it works. Also, law firms try to hire as rapidly as possible, because what happens when they have an opening, just imagine you're in the human resource department, or you're working for an attorney trying to hire someone, or you're an attorney trying to hire someone. Say you need a third-year associate to work on your litigation matters. If you need a third-year associate, that means that you're not getting work done that you would be getting done with that third-year associate. So you definitely want to have them working, because if they sit down and they're billing hypothetically $500 an hour, or they're probably more than that, maybe $700, you're losing $7,000 a day when they're not working. Not only that, but your clients aren't going to like you because you may be doing work at a high billable hour that could be done at a lower billable hour. You may not be servicing your clients correctly, doing the work, so you risk losing the clients. So just there's all sorts of reasons that law firms are under a lot of pressure. If it's a human resources person, they're also evaluated based on their ability to quickly attract resumes and to get people hired when partners are losing money. So this is just how it works. And early applications are the most important thing you can do. If you apply early, your odds of success are much better than if you applied later, because early applicants are favored. Early applicants are easy to choose from, and later applicants may not even, you may have, it may be just, they might not even be looking at you. I had an interesting thing happen. My daughter wants to go to the University of Chicago for college. And so she's applying next year. She told me, now I don't know if this is true because it sounds a little bit fantastic to be true. But she said something like, if you apply early decision, your odds of getting accepted are some kind of percentage, like 5% or 8%. I don't know if that's true. That to me sounds, might be true. I don't know. Maybe it's higher than that. But then she said, if you apply regular decision, the odds of you getting accepted are like 1%. So I just think this idea applies to schools. I think it applies to law firms. It applies to all these things. The earlier you do it, the better off you're going to be. So you have to apply to jobs early. You can't just get a job from BCG or from a job site and think, hey, maybe I'll apply to it a week from now, or maybe a couple of weeks from now. Let me think about it. That's great. But you may be taking your odds of success, just like the Chicago thing, from 8% to 1% by waiting, because you may not even get your application seen. So you have to apply to jobs early. You can't mess around with this. Then your willingness to look at firms and jobs you may not believe are prestigious or do not pay as much as your current position. This is a huge problem for people. Like people, when a market slows down, they think that they're entitled to continue working at a firm that pays top of market. And if they can't work there and make as much money, then they shouldn't work in a firm like that. This is what people do all the time. This is another dumb mistake. It ruins careers. I had an instance not too long ago where I had a woman that took time off, moved to something like Buffalo or Rochester, New York, and had been working at a major law firm, not the highest, but something like, I don't know, big New York law firm. Think of a Skadden, or not Skadden, but it's something pretty good. And she'd been working at this firm, and then she moved to Buffalo or Rochester, and then she had a baby and took not a lot of time off, 6 months off during that, and then suddenly wanted to get a job in this Rochester, Buffalo. And I was able to get her some good jobs. There's some very good firms, by the way, in Rochester and upstate New York, Hardesty Crest and all these great places. Exceptional firm, Hardesty Crest. I mean, it's just a lot of really good firms up there. And so she got this job with I don't know if it was them, but some firms. And she said, I just can't accept this. It doesn't pay, even though the cost of living is like probably 3 times lower in Rochester, Buffalo. It doesn't pay as much. It's not as prestigious a firm. I would rather not work than work at one of these firms. This is what people do all the time. So they give up in their legal career because they don't get a job. In her case, she got jobs in the most prestigious firms in this Buffalo or Rochester, whatever it was, but wouldn't take it. I have seen attorneys like her refuse to continue practicing a law firm when they can't stay at law firms or prestigious where they're working at. This could be you're not getting that job because of the market you're in or because of your practice area. So you have to take what's available. You can't possibly stop your entire career because you can't get a job in a law firm that's as prestigious or pays as much. Insane. Or not go on interviews when it might be all that's available. But people do this, and people need to move to law firms that pay less and are less prestigious. Someone who's an actor and is in a major motion picture can't suddenly say, I'm only going to be in major motion pictures if their job is to be, I don't know, something, some sort of role that there's not a lot of those roles. They have to look at other things. So it's the same thing with lawyers. They have to look at things that may not be what they want. People that come out of law school can't say, I will only work in the absolute most prestigious law firms, if that's the only jobs that they're getting, aren't there. You have to do what you can. I see people going to top law schools all the time that say, wow, this place I got a job. I saw one guy, for example, he worked in the government for 2 years after going to some prestigious law school, top 10 law school. And he got a job with this one law firm. We got him a job, even though he had no law firm experience and never even been a summer associate. And he said, I looked at their attorneys there. There's no one there that went to school the caliber of NYU. So I can't imagine working there. So he got this offer and he sat on it because he couldn't believe that this firm wasn't prestigious enough. And sure enough, the firm revoked it. This is what firms do all the time. But you have to take the things that are available to you and that you're getting, and maybe their only option. Then your current title, I'm not going to go into a lot of talk about this, but this obviously is very important. If you have a title within a law firm, that's going to have something to do with whether or not how many firms you need to apply to. So your title may be staff attorney. Your title may be law clerk. Your title may be less than the permanent title, and it's going to make it very difficult for you to get a lateral position if you're competing against others with the same titles. I'm sure there's people on this webinar that have had this happen to them. Every year, I see, every day actually, I see people that were law clerks at top law firms all over the country, top AmLaw 50 and 10 and whatever. And all they were is ever a law clerk because they failed the bar a couple times, and happens to a lot of people. A lot of people get jobs as staff attorneys or contract attorneys and things like that. My advice to you is if you have one of these titles, not law clerk, but you can, but you would, staff attorney, for example, you would just say you're an attorney, and you would just say, or you don't even say title at all. You just put down you're there. But if you're competing against someone that has a better title than you, it's an associate or something, and you're a contract attorney or whatever, then that's not going to help you. Other people, this is another one that people started doing recently, and I don't think you should put that on there. People will put that they're remote, like they'll put the name of the firm and the location, and then they'll put in parentheses remote. You don't need to say anything frickin' about that. Like, why would you disqualify yourself by saying you're remote on your resume, remote title or remote? So you need to understand your title is going to have a lot to do with things. People have perceived reputation in the legal community. This is also going to have a lot to do with whether or not you're going to get you're going to get interviews. It's going to be based on the organization you belong to, any leadership roles you've had in those organizations, things that you've done that are important. Sometimes people will have written books or been talked about in the press or given talks about things or give written papers or all these sorts of things. So if you have a very good perceived reputation in the legal community about different types of things, then that's going to make you look much better than someone who doesn't. So one example may be, I had this one recruiter that worked for me a long time ago, not that long ago, maybe 10 years ago or something. And this guy really wanted to be a recruiter, wanted to be good at it. So I was like, you need to get out there and I don't have time for this all the time, but fly around the country and give talks to law firms and student groups and anything you possibly can do. And then put those all in your resume, and you will look more like an authority and have a good reputation. So he did that. And suddenly just this particular person looks but it's the kind of things that you can do. Now, I personally could do a lot more of that, but this is the kind of stuff that you need to do that will make you look good. Because if you're applying to a law firm and you've done all of these authoritative papers and talks and things and associations, that's going to look freaking awesome to their clients, right? And that's going to look great to you. Like you have a commitment to this practice here or this. And then that's going to help you. Everybody should be doing this. Hardly anybody does. They think, why should I do other things besides work? Why should I? No, you should be doing this frickin' all the time. This is what people that get business do. Like you need to really build up your CV and what law firms can say about you, because the more of that you do, the better, the more of a no-brainer it's going to be for them to give you work and to keep you, and easier it's going to be for you to get the job. So you have to do this. And the more you do this, the fewer firms you're going to need to apply to. Another thing that's important, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but the time of year you're applying for jobs is going to determine how many applications you're going to need to submit. There are absolutely more openings in January than there are in November and December. If hypothetically, talking about January, of course, then this is a time when you should be applying to lots of places because there's more openings. Firms have just given bonuses and they know people are going to leave and look for jobs. So everyone's getting jobs. So that's important. And then many more law firms interview more people in the spring and fall than over the summer when there's summer associate classes and recruiting personnel are often busy with that. Then there's fewer people around for interviews. And then there's always a higher percentage of interviews that because there's fewer people in the market, there's fewer applicants, you're much more likely to get a position when you're applying to firms in November, December than when there's fewer people applying to them in those months. And then when you apply to law firms, when you apply is going to have a success. Applying in November and December, sending out a bunch of applications, probably a good idea in the future to think about because there's fewer people applying to the same job. This is another huge deal. This probably applies to every single person on this webinar about your ego and the ability to persevere despite getting rejected, despite not getting interviews and so forth. The strangest thing happens, and before I go into this, is attorneys that if they apply to a law firm and they don't get rejected, and they get rejected, and the law firm doesn't respond, that this is a personal affront to them, and the law firm's going to always remember it, that they applied, and it's going to make them look stupid, and people are going to remember it, and it's going to undermine their reputation in the legal community because they applied to this firm and the firm didn't hire them and so forth. And everyone's going to remember it. Let me just be very clear with everyone that's watching this. Resumes come into law firms with such regularity that no one is going to remember that you applied. Now, if you're in a small town where there's only 5 small law firms and you see the same people every day and no one's applying to them, then maybe they'll remember it. But 99% of the cases, no one remembers. They just go through these piles of resumes. They don't remember names. They don't remember anything. They just look at your resume. Most of the time, your resume, when you're applying to big firms, isn't even reviewed by people practicing there. It's just looked over by the better firms, just looked over by someone in HR departments in big law firms in New York and so forth are very good people in them. And many times their attorneys have also worked in big firms, but no one's going to remember that you applied. You don't have to worry about your ego. If you're one of 100 applicants, no one cares that you applied. No one cares that anything. It just doesn't matter. Everything about your resume is just a business decision. Who's a better business risk if we have a job opening? If we're just applying to a firm, is it a good business decision to hire this person? If someone sends you, again, a notice about their service of installing solar panels and you say no, you're not going to remember who the frick sent that. You're certainly not going to judge the company because you didn't buy it and think less of them. You don't do that every time you see an advertisement on television. Do you think the frickin' company doing the advertising cares if you don't buy it? This is just, your ego cannot be involved. No law firm is passing judgment on anything, whether or not, other than can they make money. This is not a popularity contest. This is not joining some popularity group in middle school or high school. This is just a business decision. Can we make money? Is this the best person to make money for us? That's all they care about. So you have to really realize that there's no ego involved. There may be someone that's a better fit for them because their child is friends with a partner's child in the firm. I mean, who knows? But none of this matters. It's just crazy. Law firms do not remember that you ever applied or even care. It doesn't matter. You could have applied 10 times to that firm when they didn't have an opening for someone like you. And then the 11th time they do. So who cares? So applying and getting no response or rejection has nothing to do with you. It's just economics. It's attention span. It's when you apply. All this stuff has nothing to do with you or your ego. You have to just take yourself out of this freaking situation and understand that it's not an affront to your ego when you're one of 200 people sending your resume to the same firm at 1 month. Come on. Do you really think you are that important that anyone cares about any of this? So again, television advertiser company sends an offer in the mail. Doesn't feel bad when you don't respond, and neither should you. This is a marketing operation. You improve your marketing message, you do all these things that I'm talking about, and you're more likely to get jobs. But you should never care if you don't get interviewed. There are literally tens of thousands of law firms, and you should never take it personally if the economic tide's not going your way. You can do things to make yourself more attractive economically, meaning you can do things like your resume better and apply to more places and make sure you're focused on the practice area, but that's it. Next one is just commitment to a search is going to have a lot to do, and we're almost done with this webinar, and this is a long one. Your commitment to your search is very important. Many times people dabble, saying they send out one lotto, apply to one firm, which is like one lotto ticket, and they just apply here and there. They don't get any results, and they think that's it. And that's like someone that is trying to get married and goes out on a few dates or expresses interest in a few people and doesn't get a good response on a dating job site or whatever dating site and doesn't get good results. Come on, you have to look at a lot of things. And if you're committed to your search, you're going to get incredible amounts of opportunities. And if you approve as many as you can, like if a recruiter sends them to you and you prepare for interviews and do better and do all this, perfect your resume, don't give up, you're going to do much better. Come on. If you're committed, your results are going to be a lot better. So you have to be committed to your search. You have to dive in. You have to not dabble in it, and you have to become a professional job searcher. And what does that mean? That means you continually improve. You continually work on your resume. You continually go to webinars like this, which, by the way, I have so much respect for anyone that, watching this, because this is really the only way that you're going to become a better job seeker. These 20 suggestions are going to change the course of your life if you understand them. So this is huge. And then your commitment to your practice area, which I talked about at the beginning, meaning if you're committed to your practice area and you're not dabbling around between practice areas and switching practice areas, then they're going to have a much better chance. People always are trying to approach BCG and saying, hey, I want to switch practice areas. I've been doing litigation for 3 years. I really want to be a real estate attorney. Why in the world would a law firm hire someone to be a real estate attorney if they don't have any experience and have never done the practice area? They'd have to be insane. You might be able to find a firm to do it. So maybe you're at credible background, you're this huge firm, and you want to go to a smaller firm in a smaller city and try something new. Maybe they'll do it. But law firms have very little incentive to hire people that aren't committed. As I said earlier, they want specialists. You need to be specialized, and you need to learn. You just need to understand that. A law firm's not there to train you to do a new practice area. That's crazy if you're a lateral attorney. So you need to show you're committed. And then these are just a few things that'll just give you a little bit of insight in. My first offer of attorney was of a patent attorney. He was coming from Seattle and applying for jobs, I think, in San Francisco. And I couldn't believe the interest this guy's got. I think there was one major law firm that made him an offer, and he came back and said, because of different taxes and cost of living in San Jose versus Seattle, he needed a $50,000 bonus and a $30,000 higher salary. And back then, that was a huge amount of money to work in that firm. The firm said yes, which I thought was crazy, but they did. And back then, patent attorneys got a lot of interest from law firms. They were often very marketable. Because of that, I gave this message to all the recruiters that ever came to work in the company over the next several years. I said, you should basically send them to every possible firm you can that has openings for patent attorneys. Now, this is not about patent attorneys, but I'm telling you right now, this is about how to market yourself. And almost all cases, when the recruiters would do that, these attorneys would get interviews and job offers with these patent attorneys. And the reason patent attorneys are rare, we're more rare than they are now, is because you have to go to law school and college and maybe graduate school and major in something that's a scientific discipline. Then you also have to take the patent bar. Most people that major in scientific disciplines and become engineers and stuff can make very good money and never go to law school. But anyway, so patent attorneys back then were very marketable. and would always get interviews when we sent them out to all these firms and other practice areas and firms without openings and so forth. And back then, because there were so few patent attorneys, law firms were always excited to attorneys to review their resumes and hire them and so forth. And in patent attorneys were also more willing to apply to firms when they did their searches. They did not have the same ego that people might have coming out of Columbia Law School or something and applying to only a few firms. They were first and foremost engineers, and they realized that statistically, the more opportunities they gave themselves, the better they were likely to do. They're still that way, but they don't have their egos involved in rejections or scientific. They think, most of them think in terms of that. And they understood instinctively that there was a need and a business case for if there was a need, then the law firms would hire them. Given the success of the search method, even though, this is the market for patent attorneys is nowhere near what it used to be, they still get tons of interviews and jobs compared to other practice areas. And so they're just very marketable. But the reason is that they buy in to this method of looking at lots of firms. And because they buy into it, I'm almost always patent attorney committed, always able to get them interviews and jobs. And it's nowhere near as marketable to be a patent attorney. It's not even 20% as marketable as it was back in the day when people were getting these huge starting offers and bonuses and things. But the point is that patent attorneys buy in to this method of applying to lots of places. They don't get their egos involved. They know they can negotiate their salaries when they get offers. And compared to other practice areas, meaning someone that went to Columbia or whatever, any University of Minnesota or whatever law school they went to, or University of Idaho, most people in other practice areas and other than patent, they get their egos involved. They fear rejection. They're guarded, and they think that all this has something to do with all these other forces that beyond their control, meaning all these things. And those who buy in, though, like patent attorneys to this search method, almost always do well. Always. It's, again, I have people who have had tragedies. Like I've told the story before, but this one woman whose boyfriend or something died. And I don't know, when she was like 6 months into her legal career, and she was at a big firm, and she in a market like, I don't know, was San Francisco. It's a very competitive market. She couldn't get another job as a corporate attorney there. So I was like, okay, we need to apply all these small markets. Let's apply to Nashville, and let's apply to Cleveland and Cincinnati and Akron, Ohio, and like all these weird places. But she was like, what do I have to lose? And I was looking for jobs for months before I found Harrison, because I worked with her, and I'll do this. And she, of course, got plenty of jobs. So I got her interviews and all over. And so much so that she stopped going to interviews because she was just like, this is crazy. So this is what you need to do. So people, for example, will have various levels of enthusiasm when they work with us. Their emotions and egos will get involved. So they will give up their searches. They will stop looking at a lot of firms. They will think it has something to do with BCG being ineffective or something. And if you understand the process, then you're going to do much better. And really, this is how with BCG, how it works, but it's like that for your personal job search as well. Okay, first of all, wow, congratulations. Noticed almost everyone that started this call is still on it, which is awesome. I will take a quick break just for a minute or two. When I come back, I'm going to answer questions. There are lots of great questions here, so I'm actually very excited to answer them because this is going to help a lot of people. I will also, just in terms of your questions that you're asking, the people have asked, there's questions for people that are older. There's questions from people that, all these things that are very good questions. So I'm actually very excited to answer questions. I think that this will be one of the best parts of the webinar today. And I will hopefully be able to get to every single person's questions. The only final thing that I would say before we take a quick break, and come back to questions, is I will not show anyone's name. Sometimes you're logged into Zoom and you're worried about your name. So all the questions that you ask are going to be anonymous. If you have any questions that are personal to you and you want to change the location you're talking about, or your practice area, your name, or your whatever, I will answer them. But the important thing is for you to be able to get more understanding of your legal career to the extent I can help you and give you input on those questions. And the more questions, better. The more questions, anytime we think a question is not a good question, it's probably a very good question. All right, so let's get to the questions. And again, I just want to let everyone know that's on this. It's great. Almost everyone that started this was here at the beginning is still here, which is amazing because this has been a fairly long webinar. So I hope this information has helped. The other thing I would just say to everyone is that this sort of information that you're learning, regardless of a situation where you think you are in your career, in terms of how successful you are based on your law school, based on the decisions you made, just understanding the information in this particular webinar could really change the direction of your career. And I've had some mentors. Tony Robbins is someone that I used to work with and know very well. And then I had people that have been best-selling authors and things that were my mentors in business or self-improvement industry. Someone like Tony Robbins was something different than I do. But the point is that having people that understand what you're trying to do and can tell you, that have experience in it, is very important, because you can get those ideas and you can run with them and change the direction of your life and career. Now, I'm not by any stretch of the imagination expert in self-improvement of telling you about fitness and health or whatever. But this particular stuff, it's all that I've done my entire career, with the exception of a few years. So this stuff can really help you a great deal. And so I have a ton of respect for people that are willing to learn this stuff, because most attorneys don't. The ones that do learn it come back to me over and over again every week on LinkedIn and different sites and emails, and just saying like they've changed the direction of careers and stuff. So, and it's not that I'm doing anything special. You could listen to anyone in this field, and it's committed to it. I don't know anyone, but you can listen to anyone and get answers, and that can really make a difference in your career when you are able to learn stuff, because most people don't. Most people don't learn anything about the decisions they should make. It's very common, by the way, graduates of Yale Law School in particular make decisions that early on in their careers that make it close to impossible they're ever going to get a job in a law firm, because they probably don't think they need to learn this stuff because they went to Yale Law School. So that is important. So I'm going to actually start with the questions. I'm going to go in a random order. So if you ask questions last, I may get to them first. If you ask them first, I may get to them second or whatever. But there's a lot of good questions here, I think, from people. Okay, so any advice for attorneys who are older, 50 plus, in addition to deleting graduation years in your resume when they apply to jobs so their age doesn't help against them? The first thing is, law firms receive resumes with graduation years and so forth being deleted all the time. It's incredibly common, but the problem is when you delete graduation years, it looks like you're trying to mislead the firm. So they can look up your bar admission date and see all the information. It looks like you're trying to mislead the firm. That you could even be older. Could be older. So what do you do in that situation? What you can do is, they're not necessarily going to hold your age against you, because I've seen people literally in their 60s and 70s get jobs. I've seen partners with business move firms in their late 70s. So none of this is something that's necessarily going to be held against you. But what I would say is that you shouldn't delete the graduation years for a resume, but obfuscate that. You need to be completely honest about it, because if you're not, then law firms are going to assume the worst. You're very old. Keep your stuff on there. But what you do is you obfuscate. I don't know how to spell this. Obfuscate. Is that right? Horrible speller. You obfuscate your experience. What do people do? And this is the way you do it. You just say, instead of having 5 firms and all this stuff, 5 firms, et cetera, on your resume, you resume with years. And this is something for everyone to understand. If you've had a lot of jobs, so it doesn't mean you're old or anything, but if you had a lot of firms in your resume, you say something like private practice. This is just the way you would do it. Practice. And you go 1990 to 2011, or something like that. And then you would just say private practice, and you would say worked for large law firms or whatever firms, including, then you might say a few firm names, you would just say you name a few firms. So then you might say also worked in a solo for whatever. You just describe your private practice. So you wouldn't have position one and then just things like this. So this is just a big thing to tell people that you've had a lot of jobs. This is what you do on your resumes. This is like a no, because if you do this, it just starts looking crazy. Like you're moving around between all these different places. And when I interview people, I actually am trying to hire one right now, someone that deleted their graduation year and so forth. But if you delete your graduation year, then same time, people put down the date of their first position. So of course we understand what you're doing. Sometimes people it's even crazier. They went to law school like 10 years after graduating from college or something, and then they list the jobs they had after graduating from college. So basically you summarize things like this. So you don't go into a lot of detail. And then when you do this, when you summarize your private practice, stick with one practice area if you can. So practice area, so talk about that. And then this is the other crazy thing that people do. So this could save your freaking career. So if you are in-house after private practice, you made 2011 through January of 2023, 2020. So you might say worked, and you would just say in-house practice, if that makes sense. So you would just say in-house. You would describe a few of your jobs. And when you describe those jobs, you would try to keep things as close to possible as one practice area possible. Since people are not going to be impressed, especially if you're applying to law firms, then they're not going to want to hear that you've done 15 different things. They're not going to like it. So that is my advice about how to go about doing that. And so you don't delete all the jobs you've had. You make your experience work for you, and you talk about that. Sometimes to make themselves look better, if they're older people, is they will go and they will start putting stuff about fitness and things, recently completed an Ironman or something on their resume to make them look healthy. But that's just one idea. Okay, so here's another question. This is a good question. I like this one. And I may have answered this in the webinar so far, but this person says, during my job search, I've encountered firms that seem perfect for me, but they never seem to have openings. How can I approach firms that I'm interested in, even if they aren't actively hiring? You apply. So you apply to the firms. Now, let me tell you a secret, because this is very important. When you apply to the firms, do not necessarily apply. And again, I'm giving you this not as something we necessarily do a BCG, because we have to follow certain protocols. But I'm telling you something that you should do on your own. This is very important. So you not necessarily apply to the HR department. You can, but what happens with is shop anyway. I have nothing bad to say about HR department, but what you typically do when you're applying to law firms, you don't necessarily apply to the HR department. You apply also to attorneys that are the head of your practice area, What does that mean? You might apply to the HR person, but then you would apply if you're like trust and estates, for example. You might also apply to the partner in the law firm. If it's a mid-sized firm or smaller, the better. Large law firms, it may be a little necessarily protocol because they are huge 1,000 attorney law firms, but you would apply to attorneys that are head of your practice area in the law firm. So an example would be trust and estates. So why do you do that? You do that because and I'm just going to explain to you, HR may report to finance or whatever, to partner with money, or I don't know, partners with power, I don't know, money, et cetera. In that, these partners, and again, I shouldn't even be telling you this, but I'm giving you some great insight. And these people may not want to hire, or whatever reason. They want to save money, or maybe they just don't like the trust and estates person. Who knows? Whatever. But the person that's doing the trust and estates, I'm just giving you an example, may actually want someone. This partner may want someone. And when they see your application, they're going to be like, wow, this is awesome. I need this person. I can make money off them. And they will take your application and march it down to the people with money or HR or whoever controls it, which is probably the partners with power, money, executive committees, all these sorts of people. And they will say, I want to hire this person. It's perfect. I can make money. I have all this business. And so this is what you do. You don't necessarily just apply to and again, this one piece of advice could change the entire direction of your search and your career. So you apply to the people with money and so you apply to the people with money and that sort of thing. So that's, this phone keeps going off. You apply to the people you apply to the partners in your practice area that can help. That's right. So that's it. If you apply to them, then they're likely to push your application through. Whereas if you don't, you're just going to one partner, people with money or whatever, the HR, and HR may be told, just hold on to these resumes. Don't do anything with them. We're trying to save money or whatever. So you make sure you apply to those people. And I hope you do. This is going to really help you in terms of what you're doing. Okay. So this person says, you previously said in a different webinar that you don't recommend working as a paralegal. Although this seems like a way to know about an area, but it does confuse the employer why one is applying to a lesser job. Yes. So if you're an attorney, you should not be working as a paralegal. Attorneys should not work as paralegal. So that's it. So just know. So you should not be working as a paralegal. So you went to law school. If you didn't pass the bar, you can call yourself a law clerk, but you should not be working as a paralegal. And I would submit to you, this is up to you, but you should not. And I'm just telling you, I'm trying to help you work as a contract attorney or staff attorney. And I'll tell you why, or a staff attorney, because you are an attorney. You went to law school to be an attorney. Why wouldn't you be an attorney? I don't know why you don't need to go to law school to be a paralegal. And again, I'm not trying to hurt people's feelings. I'm really not, but I'm trying to help you. You should not work as a contract attorney. I see things all the time. I had this candidate not too long ago. I'm not going to say what state she was in or anything, but she was a trademark attorney, a small firm. And she was in a position where she was developing business and doing all sorts of things. And she'd gone to, a good law school. I don't know, it was American University or something, and really wanted to work at a big, prestigious law firm. So she managed to get a position as a trademark attorney, as a staff attorney in a big, prestigious law firm, with the understanding that she would never make partner, she would never be an associate. And instead of doing that, she decided that this is what she did. She became a staff attorney. Instead of being in a position where she could be an attorney for the rest of her career, associate and be a partner, she chose that just to be in a prestigious firm. So you should not be a contract attorney or staff attorney. If you can't get a job in a big law firm, or you can do all sorts of things, personal injury, whatever, there's certain jobs that are not that difficult to get that can be extremely lucrative. Personal injury, by the way, there's lots of jobs for people to do that. Becoming a personal injury attorney is a awesome way to make money. Partners in big law firms, this is just how it works. Partners in big law firms buy Mercedes cars and nice houses, good neighborhoods. Probably one. I'm just giving you an example here. I'm not trying to be rude or upset anybody's feelings, but this is personal injury. This is one real big law firm, top law school. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings, but this is just how it works. And this is what the real world market does. So these partners from big law firms and so forth buy Mercedes and live in nice houses. But the personal injury attorneys I know, and I know several of them, they buy jets, maybe fractional, but they still buy jets. And they have houses in Beverly Hills. I'm just giving an example. and Montana. And this is the reality of different things. So people think, oh, it's so unprestigious to do personal injury. This one guy, Thomas Henry, San Antonio, did something crazy. Spent, $5 million on his daughter's quinceañera, like 15, held it at a stadium. There's just all these things you can do. If you can't get a job in a law firm, you don't have to be a paralegal. You can go into one of these, frankly, just completely kick-ass practice areas like personal injury or something and do that. You can be an immigration attorney and become well-known. And these people, personal injury attorneys, bad law schools, bad performance in law school. It's just, why wouldn't you just do something where you can get a job and become, well-known? There's all sorts of other practice areas. You can do, trusts and estates. You can do immigration, workers' comp, whatever. I don't care. People get incredibly wealthy and well-known. It's just, I'll just tell you, I was looking at a office space, like I have some extra office space in Malibu, which is where I live in California. And I was looking at this office space, and this woman who showed me the office space said, yes, this one tenant of mine graduated from, I don't know, it was like Loyola, Los Angeles Law School or Southwestern or something, nothing like incredibly extraordinary, and couldn't get a job and decided to start this trust and estates law firm here in Malibu. And he's been doing it for, I don't remember how many years, but not long, 3, 5, 4 or something. And just bought for cash a $5 million house in Malibu. He's doing really well. And wow. So that wouldn't have happened had he gone to a top law school and got a job, or he could have gone to work for a year or two with a trust and estates attorney and started his own firm. So I'm just telling you, you don't need to work as a freaking paralegal or a contract attorney or staff attorney. What you should be doing is you should be trying to get a position and learn something that you can get a job in. And I will submit to you that you can probably get jobs in all of these other practice areas anywhere. So that's very important to work. Okay, so these are some good questions, and I'm moving around, and I'll get to some of the more recent ones in a second. But again, just so you understand, no, you don't need to work as a paralegal. Anybody that can go to law school and graduate, meaning any law school in the country, can do all of these practice areas. I met yesterday with a family law attorney I know. He went to the University of West Los Angeles, is one of the better known family law attorneys in all of Los Angeles. I don't think he did particularly well there, but it's not even an accredited law school. So he couldn't get a job in any state. He couldn't take the bar in any state other than California, but he managed to do that. And it's probably millions, if not at least $1 million a year. So you can do all these things. You don't need to go to work as a contractor purely. I just want to make sure everyone understands this is crazy. What the hell? No, like you do something where people will have you and you don't need to worry about, and I see people doing this all the time. I don't get it. Just do something that where you get a job or you can learn. Because this person says, during my job search, I've constructed conflicting advice about doing volunteer work on my resume. Can you provide some experience of when and how to showcase volunteer work? Okay, so law firms want to believe your commitment is to whatever they're doing, to whatever they do. So that would be the same thing that you would have if you were a attorney as well, if you were a law firm as well. Why would you include volunteer work? You can include volunteer work, but what the law firm is going to think is, why is this person not billing? Why aren't they working? And again, you're talking to businesses. So if you're talking to a business and you're saying, hey, hire me, but I'm going to be doing this stuff some of the time, is that going to be a good business decision for them to hire you? So I don't think there's anything wrong with doing volunteer experience. As a matter of fact, I think it's a very good idea. I think it's something that you should be doing, but at the same time, it's not something you need to highlight too much to law firms. So I will see things all the time. Someone might have a resume. I'm just giving you a firm. I'm Stewart. They'll say corporate. This is crazy. They'll say might be June 2020. President. I'm just giving you an example, and I'm not saying this is a firm that that I'm I've seen this, but this first firm that came to mind, it'll say corporate associate, and then they'll say something like successfully represent immigrants from whatever. I mean, this is what people do from X country, challenging deportation, whatever, something. They'll say that, and then they'll say worked on M&A. This is literally what people do. I've seen a lot of these resumes. I see them, by the way, with regularity, I mean, a couple times a week. So people will think that this is what they should write. There's a whole, obviously, thing going on in society between people think this is the right way to approach everything and others that don't. But no, law firm doesn't want to see this. It doesn't help. You may sometimes list the volunteer experience and things in your resume. I don't think there's anything wrong with having volunteer experience. I don't think there's anything wrong with talking about anything you talk about, at least if you're applying to a law firm, detracts from what looks like you're working in a law firm. Is that you can do your volunteer work stuff otherwise. Now, there's other types of volunteer work. So, like, I know someone that's on the board of the Ronald McDonald House. That's something like that, which is, I think it's for children or something. So listing things like that, listing things that could result in business, it's good. So that's good. It's actually very, because what partners in law firms do is they get involved and get on boards and things, and that actually leads to business. So it's a good thing, that type of volunteer stuff. But things like things that are actually good, where you're doing things for people, helping marginalized groups and things like that are good. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but you don't want to look like you're going to pick up and leave and go do something else. Okay, let's see. Okay, so this person writes, this is a good question that's very closely related to the topic of this webinar. And again, I'm going to get to all the questions, but every question, by the way, if you listen to these questions and the answers, I think you'll see where other people are coming from, and actually can be tremendously helpful for you. So I've been in my job search for over a year now. Appears like I've applied to hundreds of firms without success. Let me just make sure I get the right screen here. And is it time to pivot my strategy, or should I just keep applying? So this is an example of the BCG database, and these are not real people. These are dummy accounts that I've set up. So I'm not trying, I just want to show you Harrison demo. But I just want to give you a sense of, you say you've applied to hundreds of firms. Again, this is a made up resume. This person's doing corporate general, just say secondary practice area in their preferred location here. These are just firms. There's 57 firms that we have in that market. And then you would look at, I'm just showing you an example. You go preferred location, secondary reasons of interest. And again, you can see these reasons of interest, and then you get all these firms, you get 556. So this is just firms that BCG does business in all these places. You can see interview placements. So this is a huge number of places, and this person is only interested in these markets. But imagine DC, Florida, Maryland, North Carolina. Here we go, Charlotte. Now we can probably even get more firms, right? 556. How many do we have now? 13. So these are just firms that we do business with. You looked at, so I'm just showing you, this is hundreds of law firms just in these markets that we do business with. But if you were to look at other law firms, so you could say Google, corporate law firms, I don't know, you say corporate law firms, Charlotte, North Carolina. These are firms on BCG, but then you've also got Kimbert Law and V. Brook and Dennis and these small law firms. And you've got pages and hundreds of these firms. And there's so many, it's not even loading, but that should just give you an idea. If you're saying you've applied to hundreds of firms, it's time to pivot my strategy. Yes, keep applying. But the idea is fix your resume, make sure your interviews are okay, make sure you're interviewing proper, all these things. So I'll tell you just a quick story. And this story I think is important because it may apply to you. When I was in college, I had great grades, and I was getting all these interviews with all these great things, Goldman Sachs and all this crazy stuff. But I wasn't getting any jobs. I wasn't getting a lot of callbacks. I was like, what the hell's wrong? So what I was doing, just so you to make sure, I was doing one thing that was incredibly stupid. I had written a book about, and again, I was from Detroit. Detroit was one side of Detroit was almost all impoverished, and there was Black and almost very impoverished. And I'd taken a real interest in helping people from there. And I had a business and I'd set it up in there, and I'd help people in drug rehab, all these different things that I did and deployed them in my business and set up a company in there and was successful. So anyways, big deal. At least for me, it was important. And not only that, but I had written a book about all this when I was in college and gotten all this incredible good recommendations, and then had been Rhodes Scholar finalist, which is like this thing that Bill Clinton and all these famous people had done. So the point is that I was really interested in all this stuff. And so I would go to these interviews with Goldman Sachs, and I would sit there and talk for 20 minutes about racial disparities and all these different things and systematic racism and what I discovered about how people from these marginalized groups are having all this stuff. And these firms are like, who the hell's this? They don't want to hear that if you're applying for a banking job. So I was doing one thing wrong. Had I done that correctly, I'd probably never been a lawyer. I would have gone to one of these, I don't know. But the point is that you have to understand if you're doing something wrong with your interview. One little thing in your background that you're doing wrong. I was doing everything wrong with my interview. I was doing the absolute stupidest thing I could possibly have done, talking about something in great detail that had absolutely no applicability to what people wanted. Just as the same thing with this person, these people, I see these resumes all the time. No interviews. No one will interview them. They don't understand what's going on. Hey, I was at the top of my class at Columbia Law School. I was at the top of my class at Harvard. Why aren't I getting interviews? What the hell is going on? I see people like this all the time. I see people coming to me, and I'm very supportive of people of all backgrounds. But I had one guy, and I hired him to work for me because I liked him and he had a good background. So I want to be very clear that I'm not discriminating against anyone, but this guy on his resume, he mentioned, and again, I want to be very clear, any word discriminating or anything like that. He mentioned on his resume, at a one-page resume, at least, I don't know, I counted one time, 15 times where he was at. I'm not going to say if he said he was a heterosexual or whatever, heterosexual, bisexual, gay. I don't want to discriminate or have this taken the wrong way, but heterosexual, bisexual, gay, whatever, gay, not gay, whatever he was mentioning, he mentioned it at least 15 times on his resume. So papers, associations, journals, whatever, associations, volunteer stuff. It's just mentioned 15 times. And that was one thing that was wrong. And meaning emphasizing that so much on his resume was something that hurt him. And I hired him to work for me because I felt he was extraordinary in terms of his law school and all this other stuff, and his experience, but even his experience mentioned this too. He just had to emphasize his cases and things he did at a large firm. I will tell you that I hired him when he came to me because I realized he'd probably have a very hard time getting a job doing this. And I never said anything to him about this. I never said anything because I didn't want to hurt his feelings, and I didn't want to anyway interfere with that. But he had this one thing on his resume that was detracting from him getting the job. And so that one thing, because he did it so many times, and again, I'm not judging this in any sort of way, but if you saw a resume that mentioned, just say you were, I don't know, you were trying to get a job, I don't know, whatever, and you mentioned 15 times that you were a member of Make America Great or whatever, the Trump party, that probably would scare a lot of firms off. Or you mentioned 15 times that you were a member of some far left or far right or whatever, it just hurts you. So you have to look at your resume and look at it, and you have to watch What are you doing in interviews? What's wrong with your resume? What is it? How are you portraying yourself? What are you doing wrong in your cover letter? All these sorts of things. I had another experience. I'll just tell this real briefly. Like I used to, when I got into law school and my first year, so a lot of firms didn't come to interview at my law school in the first year. So everyone would send out resumes like they would with cover letters. I decided it was appropriate to have a 4 or 5 page cover letter detailing my extensive experience and all the great things that I'd done and why I would be such a good hire, which was saying the exact opposite of what the law firms wanted to hear. I was talking about books I've written and volunteer experience, people I'd helped, my college performance, like all the stupid stuff. No one cares. That was a huge mistake. So you just need to be very careful about what my webinars and things to understand what you may be doing wrong in your resume, what you may be doing wrong on your interviews. Because if you're doing this stuff wrong, it's going to hurt you. Talking about public interest too much, talking about the fact that you are a Republican or a Democrat, or I saw one woman, it was very sad, that couldn't get a job. I just want to move on because these are sometimes just one mistake you're making that will hurt you. I saw a woman when I first started recruiting, this was a long time ago. She went to, I think it was like Princeton, where she'd been champion tennis player, something awesome like that. There's a lot of really cool people that come out of Princeton, neat school, athletes, but she'd been a champion tennis player, and then gone to Stanford, I think. And then at some point, I don't know when it happened, but she was the victim of some sort of violent crime. I'm not going to even say what it was, but it was some sort of violent crime. I don't know, think about being mortally injured or hurt. So I'm not going to, but anyway, so she listed all this stuff about being the victim of a violent crime. I don't know when this happened, about being a victim, meaning associations and I don't know, volunteer work and all these things about being a victim of violent crime. Again, that's horrible what happened to her, but having all that on her resume wasn't probably a good idea. It's personal. It's not, would you list that you're a member of Alcoholics Anonymous on your resume? I mean, is that going to help you? I don't know. Or Narcotics Anonymous. Are these things going to help you? So sometimes people will do one thing and that one thing is wrong and that will hurt you. You have to be very careful. And I hope that helps you because there may be one little thing on your resume that's wrong. And if you don't fix it, you're in trouble in your resume or cover letter interview. What's an appropriate job to make ends meet while continuing to search? This one mentioned this is an interview included in our resume. No. So if you're unemployed, you apply to as many places as you need to get a job. If you want to work in a law firm, you're better off taking a job in a law firm that is going to match your interests or in a law firm, because if you take a job outside of a law firm, it's going to be very difficult for you to get another position later on. So you're always much better having a job in a law firm than not. So it doesn't really matter the practice area, regardless of the practice area. You can have a kick-ass career. I would always recommend doing whatever you possibly can to get a job in a law firm if that's what you want to do. And you take the best job you can. And anyone, by the way, there's so many personal injury firms and so many different types of firms that you can always get a job if you apply to enough places. And if you're geographically flexible, what you should be, then you're going to be much better off. Okay, let me just see here. So these are some good questions that are coming through, and I certainly appreciate them. So let's see here, and there's good questions. And again, if you have questions, you should ask them because it's helpful. With less than a year of experience, how is one expected to know what area they want to work in? Personally, there are a number of practice areas I'd be interested in. How does one focus their efforts on while unemployed to show commitment and interest aside from applying to jobs? I have taken CLE courses, but in a variety of areas, depending on what's available and of interest. Is it helpful to put these in your application? If so, do you just put in courses that relate to the position? Usually only one or two that would be related versus 15 to 20 total seminars. Okay, first of all, I appreciate you asking this question because I think it's a good question. And I think that it's something that applies probably to a lot of people here. So here's what I think. So there's basically, you don't So let's talk about practice area choices. So practice area choices. So you have essentially, this is very important for current attorneys and also for new attorneys and every person in between. So you have practice area choices that an attorney makes. And there's essentially two choices. There's transactional areas and there are non-transactional. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And transaction, what does that mean? God, my spelling is just protection. Practice areas. What's wrong with me? Oh, I see. Anyway, maybe non-transactional practice areas. Okay, so what does that mean? Transactional practice areas are things like corporate, trust and estates, corporate, trust and estates, trust and estates, yeah, trust and estates, to the most extent, real estate, whatever, patent, those sorts of things. Those are all transactional. Non-transactional would be things like litigation, any things involving writing, litigation, probably family law would be one. I don't know, a bunch of things, basically things that involve, this is really important for them to understand, involve writing, etc. And these are things that involve non-writing. And these are things that involve, I don't know, just not more not writing, I guess I would put it. So people that are good in transactional practice areas typically gravitate towards things like stuff like math, science, accounting, all that sort of stuff. This is what they are comfortable with and they like. Non-transactional practice areas are people that gravitate towards history, political science, English, all that sort of stuff, science, English, etc. So these sorts of people are much better off, more comfortable in non-transactional practice areas. So that's all you need to think about. What type of practice areas are you that would be interested in? You should go into a practice area that makes use of what you're comfortable with, whether it's transactional or non-transactional. So once you made that decision, then those are the practice areas you should go into. What do those practice areas look like? So you would go in here and you will look at active federal practice areas. To show you an example, antitrust and competition would be non-transactional. Construction would have litigation. Criminal law is non-transactional. Education, all these sorts of things. But then finance is transactional. All these things. So you have healthcare, you have litigation, but then you have compliance when stuff would be more transactional. Any practice area you look at is going to be potentially transactional versus non-transactional. So intellectual property is intellectual property litigation. That's transactional, but then you have patent. This is non-transactional litigation, but then you have things like patent, which are transactional. Yeah, so here you have the transactional and non-transactional practice areas. So I just wanted to explain that real briefly. Okay, so people say here, you recommend reapplying. This is a good question. You recommend reapplying after 6 or so months. Is this recommended? Any other thoughts on doing this? Yeah, so you continually reapply. You continually reapply to firms, and it's just you need to do this. Why? Because things change, partners change, people reviewing your resume change, needs change, all this sort of stuff. The needs change, all that sort of thing. So what does that mean? So that just means that it's the biggest example I can show you is your resume when it fits. So this is just something to think about. So the working and getting a job in a law firm it's what you call the moving parade. The moving parade is basically and it's something to think about is if you apply, you may apply here, and this is important to understand. So you may apply here and no job, right? So there's no job or interest, job/interest, right? So you may apply here, there's no job and interest. Then you apply, you apply here, you apply later, you apply here, and perfect time, right? I don't know if you did that correctly, but perfect time. So that then get an interview. So everything get hired, I guess hired is it. Everything is like a moving parade. What that means is that if you're applying at the right time, then you're able to get a job. Whereas if you're not, so you can't think that because you were rejected right here, and then also right here, and then also right here, that, that there's something wrong with you, because there's not. You just didn't apply at the perfect time. So everything is about the moving parade. And so it's important to understand that. These sorts of things, by the way, that I do at BCG with candidates, promoting myself or anything. But what I'm saying is that this is what enables us to be effective with a lot of people where we're also not necessarily able to place people when that doesn't exist. Okay, so this is another good question that I like. I recently graduated from law school and I'm interested in intellectual property law. Are there any specific economic trends that affect the demand for IP attorneys and how should firms I target accordingly? Okay, so I want to be very clear with everyone about IP law. IP law is dominated by, and will always be dominated by, for litigation and most practice area by people or by attorneys with scientific degrees, with scientific backgrounds and the patent bar. That's just, well, it'd be scientific or math, computer science, that sort of thing. So you can't just say, and this is very important, this can help a lot of people. You can't just say, hey, I want to go into IP because I like it. That's insane. You cannot do that. It's always going to be nominated by people with scientific backgrounds. So what does that mean? That means you look here, litigation, they're literally looking for people that have degrees. This is for life sciences. They're looking for people that have degrees in biology, biomechanics. And when you get into things like IP litigation, they even don't want just a degree for life sciences. They want a PhD, a lot of these firms. Look at them. It's crazy. Like, you think you're going to get a job and be competitive at IP if you don't have one of these? Here we go with the hard sciences. We have electrical engineering, computer science. It's just, what the hell? I mean, you want to compete. Now, if you're a patent attorney, you have all these other options. You have these different types of patent work. You could do that, but you have patent litigation and all these different things. And you have patent litigation for hard sciences and you have it for all these things. So you have to be in a scientific discipline. There are law schools or graduate programs and stuff that will give you a degree in IP law. If you want to be a freaking IP attorney, you need to make sure that you have a bunch of freaking science classes. Maybe even patent attorneys. Like, this is how competitive being an IP attorney is, just so you understand this. Everyone needs to understand this. So if you want to be an IP litigator, there are IP litigators that have degrees in mechanical engineering that will go back and they're working for big US law firms. They will go back at night and get an extra BS in electrical engineering as an example. And then they will even try to get a master's degree in it. They've already got a mathematical and science background, but they go back and get these degrees. So this is, and doing that just so they can potentially hold on to their jobs or be more marketable. So this is how competitive it is. You cannot, in any stretch of the imagination, think that you can succeed in the long run without this. Now, it didn't used to be that way, but it is now. Now, here's another thing to understand. So if you want to be IP, you do have another option, which is you can be a trademark attorney. This is somewhat transactional. You can do trademark litigation. You don't necessarily need a patent or background or anything like that to be a trademark attorney. It's just a different type of law. So that's that. But everyone needs to understand that if you're trying to be a IP attorney, then you're going to have a lot of difficulty unless you do one of these things. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm not trying to upset anyone, but that's just how it works. Here's another good question. So thank you, by the way, for that question. But IP attorneys, I guess my final thing is, if you want to be an IP attorney, there's two types of firms. There's firms, and I don't know what your background is, but there's huge law firms, there's law firm, general practice, and then there's, what do you call it? General practice, and then boutiques, specialized, and so forth, et cetera. So that's how that works. If you want to be a patent attorney or whatever, this is how if you want to be an IP attorney, this is what you focus on. But if you're not, then final piece of advice, if you're not a patent attorney and just want to go in, you can do general IP litigation. There are small firms that will hire you potentially, or you can do a trademark and copyright, either litigation or transactional work, but that can be a very risky thing to get into. All right, let's see here. We got the next question. I've been primarily focusing on big law firms in my search. I also consider smaller firms. And you apply and apply everywhere. You apply to big, medium, and small firms. You apply everywhere, right? So there's no reason to just apply to big firms. Even if you're at a great law school and so forth, you apply everywhere. There's no reason not to. Why would you prevent yourself from getting offers and having things to evaluate? You have to be crazy not to do that, but that's what people do. So you need to apply everywhere. Let me see. These are great questions. I really do appreciate everyone's questions. These are amazing questions, by the way. Really good. So I've heard that certain markets are oversaturated with attorneys. How can I identify those markets and decide whether I should avoid them in my job search? Okay, so that's a good question. So let's talk about markets. So certain markets, so you have regions that are oversaturated. This is an old thing here, but let me just see here. This is an old, let me see. And we have this kind of an old candidate search. Goes page, give me a second. So you have preferred locations. Actually, we have a new, here we go, preferred locations. So oversaturated markets. Alabama and Alaska are not oversaturated. Arizona, it's not oversaturated. Phoenix, probably a lot of attorneys there. Arkansas, not a lot. Los Angeles, all of it oversaturated. Oakland, Orange County, oversaturated. So Sacramento, probably not. San Diego, oversaturated. San Francisco, Silicon Valley. So all of these big markets, or Denver, Hartford, not so much. District of Columbia, completely oversaturated. And by the way, this is giving me a very good article for BCG and webinar, but oversaturated markets, Miami, oversaturated, Jacksonville, not so much. So you can see, like, when you start looking at all these different areas, if you want to go to a saturated market, it's going to be much harder to get a job. And law firms, by the way, are not stupid. Firms open offices in areas where clients and attorneys are abundant. So a lot of people, everyone wants to go to work in DC. Of course, law firms are going to want to, people are going to try to oversaturate it. Everyone wants to work in New York, and everyone wants to work in Miami, or everyone wants to work in Austin or Dallas or Houston. Everyone wants to work in Chicago. So anytime you try to get a job in one of those oversaturated markets, it doesn't mean you should avoid them. All it means is you should do your best to look at as many potential, and these are just, by the way, awesome questions. I'm just very completely impressed by, but if you look in Los Angeles, there's 1,460 law firms that BCG works with. Come on. So these are huge numbers of firms. And so if there's 14, and these are just ones that we have, there's a lot more than 1,460, but if you want to work in LA, then this is 1,500 places. So that means there's a lot of places. But the other thing that means in an oversaturated market, it's only oversaturated to the extent that you're trying to get a job in like the largest firms. That's it. So it's undersaturated, meaning undersaturated in small law firms, right? In small law firms or law firms without brands. So there's always a lot of hiring that people aren't applying to. A law firm is never completely a market's never oversaturated when there's a lot more firms there. All it means is it's oversaturated for large law firms. That's it. If it's oversaturated for large law firms, it just means that you're just going to have a harder time there. And it's a very good point you bring up. There are some firms that have this fun. You can look at this, but I'll just show you an example. So if you're looking for firms in, I don't know, there's some markets like, let's see, Nebraska. I don't know. That means Nebraska. Maybe Nebraska, or I'll look at Idaho. It's showing you kind of some examples here, like Idaho. And I'm just bringing this up. Let's see. You could search for. So I'm just looking at something here. Oh, top 200 law firms, like the largest law firms in the country. And here we go. In Idaho, you've got Dorsey and Whitney, Holland Hart, Perkins Coie, Snell Wilmer, Stoll Reeves. So what does that mean? So that means, is Idaho maybe after the pandemic, because a lot of people moved that, but is Idaho oversaturated in large firms? No. So Idaho is not oversaturated at all, right? At all. So that would be a good place to apply. Yeah. If you want to go to big firms, you apply to markets where you preferably have a connection that are not oversaturated, which is very smart to do. I would recommend that you try to, if you want to go to big firms, apply to undersaturated markets, and which is actually very interesting. So a lot of times when I placed in-house attorneys at big firms, they've always been a lot of times, not always, I don't know why I said that, but a lot of the time have been in undersaturated markets where there's not a lot of people like them. So the law firms are more open to hiring. Certain firms tend to prefer younger lawyers. How do we navigate age-related biases while applying? Okay, so that's a good point. Most businesses, most groups, most businesses prefer younger workers, right? But I'll tell you, younger workers. If you're a McDonald's would, more likely to hire, I don't know, but any business. So most businesses prefer younger workers, and it has always been that way. I'm not saying all of them do, but a lot of them do. It's just how things work. You reach retirement age and that's it. It's hard to get a job. So most businesses prefer younger workers. And then most law firms also prefer younger workers. And same thing with in-house jobs. Most in-house jobs prefer. And again, I was actually, by the way, sued by the Justice Department one time for ads. I don't know if I was sued or under investigation or something, but for advertisements where people were saying, law firms were saying, we want a first through third year attorney or whatever. And that was apparently discriminatory. I was pretty astonished by that, and had to hire an attorney and was in Washington, D.C. And it was basically because our ads were saying this law firm wants 4 to 6, and as if I was the cause of that. But most law firms were younger workers. How do you avoid those biases? So the reason for this is, because they have people, their first few years are there to learn, and then they're there to learn from the partners, and then after they learn, they're there to take. And then there's an up or out thing where if you don't become a partner or something, or have business after a certain number of years, then the law firm, to keep things competitive, they start trying to bring in people that have all those things. That's just how the market works, and it's always worked that way as long as I can remember, and way before. That's how law firms work. If you're not playing that game, then it's very difficult. So they all prefer younger lawyers. Now, they don't necessarily prefer, meaning you could graduate from law school at the age of 40 and still get plenty of jobs as a first-year associate or something, or even 50, and you could probably. And so that's not to say that they're discriminating against you because of age. What they're discriminating against is bias for too much experience. So even if you graduate from law school at the age of 19 or 20, which is people do, and then you work for 6 years in a law firm, and you're 26, and then you're considered a mid-level. They're considered a senior attorney even if you're 27. So it's not that it's the experience is the bias, not the age. I've seen plenty of attorneys get hired in major law firms after having just very little experience, being old when they get out of law school and have very limited experience. That's not what they're discriminating against. It's just important to understand. So how do you navigate these biases? You apply to firms where your experience is going to be more of an asset than a liability. Ideally, when you got older, you would have business. And I've said in this webinar that I've placed attorneys that are in their late 70s that have business. So there's no age-related bias. There's experience-related bias. And as you get more experience, you're expected to have more business. So that's how that works. Law firms prefer younger workers based on experience. And the only way you avoid that is you apply to places where your experience is more likely to be an asset than a liability. So that may be firms that don't necessarily have that. Sometimes one of the things I've seen is interesting. So this is a very good question. I've seen you can often get positions with small law firms or even I'm just playing with this thing there. Even solo practitioners and things or small law firms that value your experience and don't have that kind of up or out thing that large to mid-sized law firms have. And so that can be very helpful. So that's just something I think to think about. So it's not necessarily that you have age, it's your experience, and that's finding firms that are more likely to value your experience or your age than not. Okay, this is a good question. And I'm glad this person asked it. In my city, there are a few dominant law firms that have a tight grip on the legal market. how can I break into those firms as a mid-level attorney? Great question. How do you break into them? Best way is to, if you're in a small network into the law firms, you can network, meaning you meet people, come up again, and I'm assuming you're a small people, other side of them in cases or matters, attorney network, attorney groups, local bar, so forth. That's really the best way. I think you can certainly keep sending applications, but people are much more likely to get in if there's some sort of connection. So I'll tell you a quick story. It's funny, but years ago, I don't know, 15 years ago or something, it might have been 10 years ago. I don't remember exactly what it is, but I was interested in joining this group called TED, which, let me see this TED here. What is it? TED, this group right here, TED.com. So I wanted to join this group, which was a very difficult group to get into at the time. It's probably much harder even right now to get into this group. But what this group essentially was a group where people would, anyway, you've probably seen the talks, but they have this group where you would actually get to go to these TED meetings, which were maybe, 1,000 people would go to them or something. You'd see like Mark Zuckerberg and all these, Al Gore and all these people. Anyway, I wanted to join. I was part of the group, but I wasn't part of the main group. I was part of this like smaller group that are not smaller, actually larger group that wasn't as prestigious or difficult to get into. So I joined the smaller group. I got accepted in the smaller group, but not the real, like the big group. And so I was at this event and I was talking to this woman that was in charge of membership for the larger group. And I said to her that I didn't get into this large group. And she said, the only way to get in the larger group is to know people. They know you and you can get in. And that's really the best way to do it, is you have to know people and you have to network your way in. So I really believe in the power of networking to get in places. I've certainly, most of the success that I've had in my life, whether it's with schools or getting into firms and so forth, has been based on networking. When you network your way into places, you're much more likely to get into something. So you have to figure out, put yourself in places where people are going to see you, where they're going to know you, where they're going to recognize you, and where all that stuff's going to happen. If you're able to do that, you're going to be much, much more successful than you would be otherwise getting in someplace. Let's see here. Okay, so this is a good question. Someone asked very early in the webinar, so I got into it. Person says, my experience, the job market for immigration attorneys has been volatile. How can I determine the optimal number of firms to apply to given the unpredictability in this practice area? It is volatile. Immigration has tons of smaller firms, solos, etc. You need to find these firms. So find these people and apply. So what would I do if I was an immigration attorney? I think getting an immigration attorney is among the easiest jobs to get. Even with a volatile economy, there's always people. So immigration attorney, I'll just show you an example where I'm at. Attorney Los Angeles, here we go. Immigration attorney Los Angeles. You would look at these people and you can see, again, there's so many here that they're not even all loading. So you go down here. I don't even know what I'm doing wrong. I got a smaller screen. But the point is that there's just so many of these freaking immigration attorneys. It's ridiculous. And so all you need to do to get a position, very easy. I'm not trying to be condescending here, but there's so many immigration attorneys that, again, that there's pages and pages of these attorneys. You can similarly just Brucher Law, whatever this person is. There she is, Miss Brucher. I don't know if she's got a website, but this woman is just one example. You could apply to her and apply to hundreds more like her, whatever market you're in. There's going to be a lot of them, and you would probably be able to get a position. It's not that difficult. So that's what I would do. And this particular statement applies to anybody in all practice areas that you would want to do the same thing. So that could be very much helpful. Okay, so this person says right here, I've been working as an intellectual property attorney for several years, but I'm considering transition to environmental law. How do I gauge demand for environmental law in my region? way you would do that is to see the demand, you would look at and see how many jobs they have. That would be one thing, many jobs in your practice area in environmental. So you would look at that, and then that would be one thing. And then you would research law firms, and that example would be just going to the VC database. You want to look for law firms that do, let's say you're in, just give you an example, California, Sacramento. Go see Sacramento. It's just an example, Sacramento, and then you would search for environmental. This is something you're doing on BCG, but I'm just giving you an example. You would search for environmental. You can do these searches on your own, on Google and so forth, but there's 46 firms that do it. And then if you were to look at, so this is just an example, Sacramento, if you look at Los Angeles and you did the same search, then you get probably a lot more than 71. So that's how that works. So just looking at different markets and seeing what's going on. But the problem with any time we're thinking about transitioning into a practice area is you're not going to get a job at a firm that's as good as yours most of the time. It's going to be very difficult, because why would someone hire someone that doesn't have a lot of experience in that practice area? And even if you do get those jobs, what that means is you're going to be losing all the experience that you had in your previous position and the marketability that you would have gotten based on that. Because this person says, I've been applying to firms in various practice areas, but I'm unsure if my lack of specialization is hurting my search. When is it advisable? So when you have experience in one practice area is when you should do that, one practice area, or can focus your resume on one practice area. That's it. So once you have experience in one practice area or can focus your resume on one practice area, that's the time you should be focusing on a single practice area. Simple as that. So if you don't have experience and you're just like a law student or something, or you're applying for jobs early in your career, then that's how you should do that. Okay, this person says, this is a good question. Another great questions, by the way. Great participation also in this webinar is awesome. It's a long webinar and people that started are still watching. So I'm thinking you're good information. So can you share some insights on our job applications to bear for someone with 2 years experience compared to someone with 10 years? So 2 years is easier to get a job, because if you have 2 years of experience, you're not yet partner or want to be partner now, I guess. So someone with 2 years of experience is much more impressionable, eager to work hard, a lot of energy still on them. And then someone with 10 years is more experienced, and because they're more experienced, they're less marketable. Not a partner, no business, assuming this person, no business, higher salary, competing, which is billing competitive with partners, meaning partners are more likely to want to do work themselves than give it to someone that's senior. So 2 years, you need to apply probably to less firms than someone with 10 years. But the answer to that question is that in both markets or both experience levels should be applying to just as many firms. Why wouldn't you apply to just as many firms? Because the reason you'd want to apply to just as many firms is because every firm you apply to is one potential more opportunity. You don't know what's going to be on the other side. You don't know what is going to help you get. You don't know what kind of offer you're going to get or what opportunity they're going to open up based on those applications. So the smartest thing you can do is apply to all those, just as many places as 2 years, as 10 years, because it's likely to help you. Okay, I've taken leadership roles in professional organizations, but I'm unsure how to highlight this in my resume to demonstrate my leadership skills. What's the best approach to showcase leadership experience better? You should always list these on your resume. So, let me see if I have an example of those. I'm just going to look at these again, this BCG sample accounts. Let me just see if I can show you what other people are doing. Just give me 1 second. Sure. Really great questions here. Let me see. Harrison demo. I'm going to make sure these are not real. So here's some demo. And I'm going to see if I have any examples of how other people are doing this. That may be good. These are fake names. I'm not seeing fake resumes. So this Niles Taylor. This particular, so I was looking to see if I had some examples of professional associations and resumes. It doesn't look like I do. These are just kind of phony resumes. But what people do is they would sometimes list this type of experience. This says intern experience. They would sometimes list, professional associations or other things there. It's very helpful, by the way, to do that if you belong to professional associations, especially leadership roles, because that shows that you're likely to get business. It shows a commitment to a practice area, or it shows a commitment to legal. It's when applying to colleges. So when applying to colleges, it's just an example. Lots of people with top grades and LSATs and all this LSATs and so forth. So lots of people like that, but very few top athletes, or you get the idea, or people with extraordinary abilities or something, extraordinary skills or leadership or whatever. So it's the same thing with law firms. If you have these leadership roles and things, professional organization, that's going to really help you stand out. And that should definitely be highlighted on your resume. It's awesome. You definitely want to get that on your resume, because if you put that on there, it's going to help you. So there's no approach is to have a section on your resume where you list that, and that will look very good. And you should do that. But yeah, will help you. Unless it's in something where you're taking the side of some political issue, whatever, that could help you. Person says, it's another good question. I've been practicing law for quite some time now and have a lengthy resume. How can I make sure that my resume remains really appealing, easy to read? Okay, ideally resume 1 page. That's pretty much it. You often do not need to list a bunch of stuff, to list tons of info. For example, let me just give you an example of one of these sample resumes. So this person, let me just find it. So this person is at this fake law firm called Wong and Associates. And so they have all this information. So I'll just give you an example of what I would recommend with all this. So you take this, if a long resume, you would basically say, you would shorten this up. So you say general practice, this person does a lot of different things, but you would shorten this. You would shorten all this summer associate experience. No one cares about that. People only care for small things like that you may have done. They don't care about all this experience. You shorten everything down, and you basically just say that you were doing work in one practice. You shorten everything down. You don't have to list everything you did. Some of the worst resumes are resumes of military people. I don't know why. Maybe there's some class they teach them, but military resumes typically very, very long. You can always make things very short. So if you're a litigation attorney, you can just say litigation, and everyone knows what that means. If you would say commercial or whatever type of litigation you did. All of this, if you put the title of what you did, I'm just going to show you here an example. If you put a title of what you did, which would be in a practice area, as you say, trust in the state's attorney, that's enough. You can put a little bit in there, but you could say family law. Everyone knows what that means. You could say healthcare, whatever. So you could say healthcare compliance transactional HIPAA attorney. You don't need to talk about a lot of different things. Sometimes when you talk about a lot of different things, you're just going to talk the employer out of it, giving you a job. So everything should be shortened. People do not need a lot of information, even though you think it's important. In most cases, it's not. So it's just something to understand. Okay, this person says, would changing jobs every 2 years be considered job hop? So the answer to that is depending on how much experience. If you have 6 years of experience, maybe. And then if you have 10, yes. If you have 14, definitely. You just have to look at it from the point of view of an employer. If you're switching jobs quite often, then yes, of course, it's going to be considered job hop. And the problem with job hopping as an attorney, just so you can understand how it works. And again, this is something that could save your career, understanding this one little thing. So that's part of the value of sticking around for all these questions, is that some of them can save your career, because people make these decisions all the time. So the idea is, if you were an employer, brought this up a little bit earlier, but if you were an employer and you were looking at someone to hire, and that person had moved jobs every couple of years, then would you want to take a risk on that person, or would you want to take a risk on the person that never moved? Just put yourself in the shoes of any employer. You would almost certainly prefer the person that had never moved. And so that's how law firms are too. They want to hire people with the most stability. So I'll just tell you, this is just a quick story about my experience in hiring people. I think I've told this before in these calls, but my first hires at BCG for BCG recruiters were the following. I hired one woman with 16 years of experience at a law firm as a recruiting coordinator. So I don't know what firm as a recruiting coordinator. I hired another person with 8 years at a previous law firm. And this is important for everyone to understand, because talks about 8 years at a law firm. And then I hired several with 1 to 2 years, 3, 2, some that were fired, whatever. So these different people. So what happened over the course of 20 plus hires that I noticed was that the people with 16 years of experience as recruiting coordinators, a particular person stayed with me for, 17 years with me. So maybe the person had 14. I don't remember what it was, but 14 or something years, but stayed with me for 16, 7. I don't know what the exact number is, but something like that. The person with 8 years stayed 10. And maybe it was, 10. The several with 1 to 2 and 2 to 3 stayed the same amount. So this is how it works. Except if you're an employer and you look at someone's resume, they're typically moving. If they're moving a lot or not moving, that's what they do the next time. And this is very important to understand. So what happens is people get into various employers and they find reasons to move. Maybe they think the grass is greener. Maybe they don't like partners, or maybe they don't like their peers, or maybe they're not getting criticism, or who knows. And so when that happens and they think that they're not on the right path, they think it's time to leave. And actually, when you start getting feedback from a firm like that, then you improve. And this is what the people that have employment stability with their firms do. They continually take feedback and get better, and they learn how to navigate. And then the longer they stay, the more the employer values them, and the more likely they are after that feedback to advance. Most of the time, not always. So that's how that works. So that's what happened to me at BCG. But here's the problem. Here's the big problem. And this is worth the price of admission for this particular webinar. So the problem is that when you move, there is a huge suspicion that you're leaving because of performance, performance issues, because of performance issues due to personality conflicts. Sometimes, I'm just telling you an example, is one where law firms see that and they quietly push the person out. I know one attorney that has switched jobs every 2 to 4 years when his alcoholism became so noticeable that he was basically pushed out, but in a way that was quiet because the law firm didn't want their client. Anyway, so the point is that people move for all sorts of reasons. So when you start moving firms a lot, and this is very important to understand, law firms may assume that there's something wrong with your performance, and that's why you're moving. Like, why would you move? If you're doing good work in the law firm, why would you move? So that's off they think. So if you have good reasons, like you're trying to move to a better firm, then that's good. But when you move, there's a suspicion. And what is interesting, I think, is that people that are moving to a market where they're from, or where their spouse is from, that sort of thing, or something along that, or something like that. So when people are moving like that to these kind of markets, they're much more likely to get a job. And the reason for that, much more likely to get jobs. The reason for that is because I think when they're moving to a market where they're from, or their spouse is from, performance is not in question as much as it would be as if the person was moving locally. So anytime you move, so if you're moving every 2 years and there's no firm reasons for these moves, there's nothing necessarily in your back, there's nothing that indicates you're moving to a better firm where your firm that you're at has gone out of business to local firm currently. So that's how that works. So law firms expect you to go there, commit, and be able to stick around and do good work in a long period of time. Okay, these are just a few more questions. It looks like there's a few pending, but I think I've answered things related to those. So give me 1 second here. Okay, I recently completed a search clerkship and I'm unsure whether I should prioritize applying to larger firms with more prestige or smaller firms where I might gain hands-on experience. What's your take? Okay, so this is actually a good question. So and I'm not trying to be rude here, but it used to be that I did a federal district court clerkship and I thought it was this huge deal and stuff. But now there's federal district court clerkships and federal circuit court clerkships that I don't believe, and maybe it's because salaries are higher. I don't know what it is, and I still think they're very competitive. I don't believe that they're quite as competitive as they were 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 15 years ago or 20 years ago. So I think they're, for some reason, what I'm seeing, and I'm not being rude here, is that that more people are getting them with different types of qualifications. That used to be like a circuit court clerkship was very prestigious and only the very best people would get them. And then those people would have their kind of choice, the best law firms. And now it's not as much. I don't know why. And the same thing goes for district court clerks. Now they're still very prestigious. They give you excellent experience, service, all these things, but it's not as, it used to be almost like a shoe-in to large law firms. I don't think it's as much as it was. So I'm not saying that in a negative way. I'm just saying I don't think it's as much as it was. So so my take on this particular question is that you should apply to larger law firms. You can still get jobs in smaller firms and mid-sized firms, but I think you should not prioritize anything. I think you should apply to as many firms as you possibly can with the idea that you will take the offers that you get and have things to compare them. The example is dating. You may date people from different backgrounds and things and decide the kind of person you like. It doesn't mean you have to only go on dates with one person or only apply to work with only date people that are blonde or brunette or redheads. You want to work different races. You want to see who you like and who likes you. So you need to have a lot of variety in the kind of places you're looking at. And that's extremely helpful. Okay, so this person says, this is a good question. What if the volunteer work, give me a second. This is actually a good question here. Okay, so what if volunteer work fills in the gap on your resume, e.g., I moved to a foreign country, worked as a volunteer lawyer for an NGO for about 10 months before I got a job with a law firm. Yeah, that's great. So yes, in a foreign country, yes, you should list that. That's very good that you did that. And it shows the resilience and the ability to stay employed and do things in a foreign country. So no one expects you to have moved to a foreign country, especially even with a spouse or something in your resume like that. Okay, so this person says, how would you recommend addressing, this is another great question that I very much appreciate. This person's asked, they say, how can you recommend addressing prior layoffs that are economy based? Okay, so here's the problem with layoffs is I'm not, again, trying to upset anyone or say anything, be a mean guy or not be sympathetic, so you just grab it here with people that have bad experiences. But the problem with when you're laid off for an economic based reason is that usually, not always, for people with more than 1 year of experience, with more than 1 year, firms will lay off the people not providing the most value. So what does that mean? So the people getting lots of work, navigating, networking, working the hardest, whatever, working most hours, et cetera, are the ones that don't get laid off. So anytime there's a layoff in most firms, no, it's not all firms, and it's sometimes there's practice here is to just completely take a dump, but fall down. But most of the time when a law firm lays people off, this is what they do. Unfortunately, there's no ranking mechanism you're not graded in a law firm. So there's the idea is that people are not graded. So the only way that other law firms know your grades are through things that you do. Grades are things that happen. That would be layoffs or all these different types of things, layoffs or moving firms too much. As people see this on your resume, it's like a grade. So how do you address it? That economically based. Sometimes there's our economic crises. Law firms during bad economies will lay off a lot of corporate people or that sort of thing. So it's not the end of the world, especially if you're very junior or don't have experience. But you want to see if you can be a little not as direct about that as possible. If it's economically based, you can say that, or you can say something like firm eliminated practice area or firm let go all second to fourth year associates, something along those lines would be good. You typically don't want to list it on your resume. You will talk about it. When you're unemployed in a major market, it sucks because if you get laid off in some of these big markets like New York and stuff, it can be very difficult to get another job. So you may have to look at smaller markets sometimes, not always, but a lot of times. Okay. Yeah. Great webinar. I appreciate everyone's questions. This was, I hope for everyone here, to be on a webinar for almost 4 hours is a lot of time. And I think that by spending all this time, it's incredible that most people that started this webinar stayed on for the whole thing. So that's great. You are doing a tremendous service to yourself and your career by being on these webinars. I don't even think this one was organized. We forgot to get on the email about it, but so it's great that you were able to make it. And I think I have a lot of respect for anyone that's willing to learn and improve themselves and gather this sort of information that can make a huge difference in your career. Just this webinar alone, if you took notes or will remember what was said and reflect back on it, maybe go to a replay of it if one's posted at some point, can be very helpful to your career and hugely helpful. Again, a lot of respect for that. What I'm excited about is I was going to do it this week, but I'm going to do it next week. I'm pretty sure, 95% sure, is we're going to do and this is a real treat. And let me just give you the email address while we're on here. It's where it's going to go. It's going to go to Jared at Barrister Consulting, which is what BCG stands for, consulting.com. And if you can try to do it right now, this is the name. I'll just make it larger so everyone can see. Send your resume, and we will remove your name, change it, and remove, change your employer, all that kind of stuff. Or you can do it before you send it. But we'll do that, and then next week I will we'll review your resume, send it. We'll review your resume. And tell you how to fix it. The things that are wrong that I see, I'll tell you how to fix it. And this particular webinar, if you present again next week and I review your resume, which will be modified. I'm not going to show your name or your employer, but you can change that before you send it. I'll change it again. You can change your law school, change it again. But the point is that this will be a very good webinar that will review your resume. And so that is what I would highly encourage you to send your resume beyond that. Now, the other thing that we'll do on that webinar that's going to be cool is I will also put in a fake name into our database, and I will show you in live the opportunities that someone with your background has and how you would apply them. So this person, for example, let's say this is kind of a weird practice career with this person saying they're this IP litigation, and we'll just put that in as a fake practice area. We will go into the BCG database and I will show you the sorts of jobs that are available, which is cool. So you can see the demand there, and which I'll show you. Honestly, I probably shouldn't even be showing this right now because some of it is confidential, but not that confidential. I'll show you these jobs. I'll show you jobs that we have on Law Crossing, which is a freaking there's no jobs. It's crazy. We only show jobs with the crossover. I'll show you recommended firms, which is fun. So these are firms that we recommend, and then we give them point values, meaning how likely is this firm to interview someone. So I'll show you all that. I'll show you what else? I'll show you matching. We have all these kind of things that we do, which are fun. So we'll show you matching firms, there's all this cool functionality that we've spent, honestly, over $100 million developing. So we'll be able to show you all these different firms that are most likely to hire someone with your background, and then also different ways to find firms doing different things. An example would be if we wanted to, I think I may have showed this person's background earlier, but if you wanted to do corporate general, we'll show you the kind of jobs and firms you can find there. So this will be an exciting webinar. Just here, I hope you can see that we've found hundreds of particular jobs from this person. We'll also show you CG archive jobs are fun. These are firms that have had jobs in the past in those practice areas. So you can see that, and just all this kind of fun stuff. So next week will be a fun webinar. And I will also, once we fix your resume, I will be able to show you different types of firms and things you can apply to, which I think will be pretty freaking awesome. And also we'll review your resume. If you send your resume right now, typically there's always like more resumes than we can get to. I'm telling you first about this. If you send your resume now, it will definitely get reviewed if you send it in the next day or two before the formal announcement goes out about this. So I will make sure that as a prize and present for staying so long in this webinar, that you get to see the first that we get to your resume first next week, and that we get your resume at all. Because typically there's far more resumes than we can review. So what I do is I take out different people that are similar. Your resume, if you send it, I will make sure it's reviewed. So next week. So thanks again, everyone, for being on this webinar. I think definitely learned a lot. Smart, very smart to be on this. One thing I'll just say, and I've said this before and again, that every week I hear from people that spent time learning this stuff. And again, there's nothing special about me other than I've committed to this profession. And they spent time learning the stuff and have literally become incredibly successful attorneys. It doesn't matter where you went to law school. It doesn't matter well you did in law school. It doesn't matter what your first jobs is. It doesn't matter what sort of challenges or mistakes you made. If you learn the stuff, you're going to be really successful. Thank you for believing in yourself and doing this. And I'm excited about next week, hopefully going over your resume. Thanks again.